dormant audio, is that correct?
Well, I don't know, because you have to normally mute things. So.
Yeah, I don't normally help with this at this end, right? So
No.
you're in the waiting room, Jonathan, is
Okay.
that right? That be, yeah, okay.
Yes, if you let me in, yeah.
So just get you into your room.
No, no, she needs to be given similar power to let people in.
Yeah, that's fine.
So should I join with?
I'll just make you co-host, just
Okay.
make it easy, and I'll get her connected.
So it's all being recorded. Like BTS, is that correct?
Controls there, I'll get the link.
Okay.
Yeah. Right, so if you join the meeting.
Right, no, that's pretty good for the video, yes. So I think you can leave that like that. Yeah.
That's good. That works with, I think that's pretty good.
Yes, yeah.
Unless you're shorter like me.
All right, yes, just. Go in a bit. Yes, I can be at the top of the screen and she'll be at the bottom.
Let's see, I'll just stand there for one
You
second.
want to stand here, see how you look?
Just,
Yeah.
no, to see if I'm like in
Yeah,
a good
you're
spot.
fine, yes, you're there. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay, but I need to check, but then my top of head is now chopped off. Anyway, yes,
Jonathan, you have to stop being so tall, you know.
yes, I know.
That's
So
right.
shall I? I
Yeah,
can
you
just stand like
crouch.
this.
Yeah,
It'll be fine.
perfect.
It'll be fine.
Perfect.
Is it possible to have a picture of the audience as well during the thing?
Might be stretching a bit
I know, well,
today.
that's what I thought.
Might be
If it's stretching it,
I think
tomorrow,
today,
can we
I think
try?
maybe
Just get it-
tomorrow.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's
maybe
fine.
tomorrow. We'll
Yeah,
have
yeah.
Aaron tomorrow
Yes,
and
okay, yeah,
he'll be
yeah,
able to-
no, it's not essential, but it's just a nice
yeah.
feature. Yeah,
No, we'll have to keep it simple
yeah,
today.
that's fine. So I should try doing the presentation, shouldn't I? Right. So that's, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we're
looking
getting
good.
there,
Looking good.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that'll better not be
Yeah,
that
can you-
anymore.
Hello.
Oh, yeah, no, I do need to put it, but also need to give her a co-host so she can do.
Oh, yes, we can give us the powers to let people in.
Yes. That's the bit I missed. So, so shall I co-host?
So I think we're all going to just use the lapel mic for the first part. So, yeah. But maybe it's worth having a handheld one backup in case it's.
How Ian as a new co-host on Fox. Are you familiar with Zoom?
Yes, but I never learned.
I do, I'm not gonna say anything. That's the nice thing.
We don't need the stress.
Right.
No, no.
And then when you're ready to start, I don't have to just check. When they're ready to start, click the little button, and that'll let everyone who's in the waiting
No,
room
no, I'm not
in.
looking at me.
And then you just need to keep an eye on this because people will arrive late and admit them.
No, no.
Anyway.
Does that make sense?
Leave it, leave it, leave it. Leave it.
Yeah. Great, so that was working. So I think we're just about there, aren't we? Is this? Yeah. Yeah. We've got the slides. We've got the. Yeah. Hello.
You put the slides with this one, right?
Oh, no, this slides are on here with this one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we're all set. So, basically, for the after this morning, this will go to using that one. Yeah. So this is just for this morning, like this.
Okay.
It's a separate symposium.
Yeah.
But I think we just accept people have to. You know, it's just much nicer as a speaker to be able to see the screen in front of you rather than spending your time like this. Which, but I think for the rest of it, it's just, I mean, I know you're not in charge of it. You know, I highly recommend having a setup like this in the future.
True.
But I've got contact with the biggest pieces. Because also, I mean, we ordered a microphone to go and stand. Is that the right? No, don't worry, we'll manage.
But do you want a handheld?
Yes,
Just in
backup,
case.
yes,
Yeah.
definitely have a backup. Yeah, thank you.
So is this the?
Yes, yeah. So I guess if you want to put that on,
Well, I don't know, I think the day before, Aaron should, something or Jake should.
put it on. If you want me to.
How are you?
Where you think you should go?
Yeah, well, it's fairly high up. Okay,
And then, okay.
you're on now, so.
Is it too loud, too
I
echoey?
think that'll be-
It's okay?
But if you want to go on, I put it on mute, so you're not on at the moment, but you need to remember to put it on.
You're on mute
And
now.
I probably Greg just use the handheld.
And then now I'm on.
Yes, so that's the trick.
And
Yeah.
it doesn't, I think it's not bad. I think-
Is that-
What do you think, Chris? I have, this is a lapel mic. Can you hear me?
Still need to go up a bit.
See, he says it needs to be.
Well, you better put this very high up.
I mean, this, when these doors are closed, it might be different.
That's true, but I don't have a very loud voice. Okay, is that any better?
Yeah.
Okay. So what, other than these, okay, here,
Well, have you got any sort of copies of last one? You have it there, if you're not going to move, that's
No.
fine. Look, you've got the copies here.
oh,
A special.
a special lapel conference. Okay. That's, three people enter the waiting room.
Yeah, well, yeah, look.
Okay,
So hopefully we're all set up because we're due to start.
testing. It sounds to me like I'm not on the mic.
It's fine.
Let me just.
And how is it?
Well, we'll check there's people online that we need to worry about because can they hear you?
Yeah, so that's not amplifying to us. It's just.
Well, I don't, well, it is,
Or is it?
it does come through the room.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but not
Not much.
not excessively. Yes.
It's not so, it's just,
So have you managed to find people in the waiting room?
it doesn't seem, can you
Yes,
hear
so
any?
Well, when we
Is-
start,
You're my
surely you
tester.
let people in the waiting room.
Can you hear?
I can hear you.
But it's not really, doesn't have any presence.
So if you just keep an eye out on the people there, just let them in.
With the,
I was a musician for the first part of my life.
but it,
No sound.
but it's, I mean, either you're speaking to be amplified or you're speaking.
It's not
So-
working.
so
You
this
have
just-
to go like
we're about to
this.
start very shortly. I mean, probably let them in.
Hello,
Now,
hello.
so they're going to arrive.
You have to have it in your mouth.
I think that's, why don't we go with that?
Hello, hello,
This
hello.
one, right? Probably.
Hello, hello. Yeah,
I
this
thought
is-
so too,
Hi.
sorry. I thought so too.
Is this working?
Yeah,
Let me see when-
I think it's gonna be easier with that.
Okay. Hello, 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 hello. It's not working. Hello?
It's Monday morning.
Not working, nothing. Oh. Get my screen. Hello, 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 hello. You can't have it when it's like on your mouth. This is. That's the problem. See, it's this one. Hello.
I know.
Hello, hello, hello. It needs to be, can't have it in. That's- Oh, that's.
Oh, what's the other one? Hello?
You know what I think the best thing to do is right here. Video. Hold this. There's been a lot of feed, a lot of blowback.
Can we check if
Uh,
if you can
Sound
hear
engineer. I know somebody.
her speaking? Like you.
Hello, that's too, I'm just gonna have to scream. It doesn't
Oh, it's
work.
because, we just need to check the microphone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This doesn't really work.
Just one minute.
This is too much, wow.
Can I suggest putting the camera and the microphone on mute while we get this sorted out? All those people who just coming are watching us now.
Are people watching us? Oh,
Are we nearly
sure.
ready to
The world
roll
is out
or?
there on Zoom?
They're all out there,
Oh,
and they're listening to that microphone.
okay. Can you take a couple of that?
You just need to do it on
Thanks. Dick.
the.
Hey. nice to see you.
Jonathan, have to show something.
Well, we're ready to go, I think, technology wise. Is the thing is, yeah, set them up wherever you think is good. Yeah.
I will do,
Yeah, right,
but I
thank you.
have them.
Yeah, great, wonderful. Yes. Yes, you'll do it again, so then, I'm doing it too. She's going to do it. But remember, yes, Graham, it's best to stand here for the online.
Yeah.
Graham's going to be doing that first.
Oh, yes, yeah,
You've
just,
got-
but this is good, okay.
Do you have the handheld?
Oh, what happened?
Well, you can see where it is. Yeah, we need the handheld mic though. We need a handheld mic. So wait till you've got that. He's bringing it.
If it works, if it works.
Yeah, but there's online people as well, so they want to hear your words. Yes, exactly. Great. Terry. Hi, nice to see you. Yes. Oh, right, nice to meet you. Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, right. Okay. Helping with Wikipedia stuff sometimes, because he wants to realize. Okay, that's a lot. Great, yeah.
Let's see if that's working.
Right. Yeah.
Just stand behind.
Stand behind there.
Stand behind here and then I'll be in focus. Will I ever be in focus? Could be another point.
What's that little box there?
Okay, good morning and welcome back to Eva in person in part, and also welcome to all of you at home online or in work online, wherever you are around the world. Just very briefly, we do all sort of normal bits. There are fire exits the way you came in. There's also another one out the back of the community room. Loos, you probably discovered, are sort of down by all the pictures down the side there, and that is probably the major part of my speech. It is sort of nice to be back at long last and to actually have a hybrid conference. Is one of the very few advantages that have come out of this pandemic that I can think of, because we actually will have people today who have registered online, who may be in Melbourne, Australia this morning, about to have their last cup of cocoa before they go to bed. And by 5 o'clock this afternoon, we may have someone in Vancouver who is waking up bleary-eyed to their first cup of coffee some 6 hours later. In some ways, we're very fortunate that London is sort of in the middle of that, and therefore we can catch people in China. We'll have a morning on China on Wednesday, from China on Wednesday, and all around and all over the world. I've written emails to many of you. I'm Graham Diprose, by the way, co-chair of Eva London. And thank you to everybody who has replied to our emails and sorted out the boring financial bits and all the rest of it. And we hope you're going to have a really great time. The exhibition that you can see here is our Flux in Art group community in London. And I've been itching to get a show in here. We actually planned it originally for Easter 2020. And here we are 2 years later. Triumphantly, it is finally up on the wall. So enough from me. I'm going to hand you over now to start the symposium to Tula Giannini, who is going to be the chair for this morning's session. Thank you, Tula.
Thank you, Graham. I have a little.
Oh, you've got a part.
Yes. Hi, it's a great pleasure to be here and to be with colleagues in person, and also we have this as a hybrid. So I decided to start with something that's as a little intro about the Ukraine, because this is all on our minds. And I wrote a poem. I do write some poems, and it's dedicated to the people and the heritage, the great heritage of the Ukraine, Ode to Hope. And I have this, I've selected this painting as a kind of a representative of the art and culture of the Ukraine. You can see it's by Zahi Svetolovsky, and it was done in the 1900s. It's a beautiful landscape of the Dnieper River. It's actually 1,400 miles long, starting in Russia and going all the way through the Ukraine out into the Baltic Sea. So I think that it's a great representation of this great cultural tradition of the Ukraine that has gone over centuries. So the poem that I'm going to read, you'll recognize, has a few little sayings in it that are very important to the whole history of American freedom. You pick them out, see if you can recognize them. So, Ode to Hope. Live free or die. Ukraine's cry for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. When less is more, stop the war. No more, no more. Rivers of tears flow down the Dnieper. Mothers' fears, children crying, dying, can't stop crying. Can't believe the fate of Kyiv under siege. This hallowed ground, lost and found. Stop the war, no more, no more. Let freedom ring, sing, sing, sing of life's and love's eternal spring. Hope is everything. Okay, now we'll move on. This is the first introductory slide here, and you see digital art and identity merging human and artificial intelligence enter the metaverse. So this is where you see the focus is going to be. And, okay, it's not there. So I have two paintings that I think really express this moment in time. The first is the fight between a tiger and a buffalo by Henri Rousseau. And I picked that because Zuckerberg did. And when Zuckerberg announced, when he announced the metaverse and it changed the company name from Facebook to Meta, he selected this painting, which is in the Cleveland Museum of Art. And what he did was he had children or teens there, and he animated the painting, and it became an immersive experience. It brought the painting to life and the children interacting with it. And the thing was, he in this whole ad, it was only a few words. This is the dimension of imagination. And imagination is really the key word there. So we move with the metaverse, everyone is thinking high tech, which it is. But at the heart of it is going to be creativity, digital art, and seeing the world through the human lens, because we're creating a world. And I thought it was very significant that the one word, the key word, was imagination. So this potentially has the moment where we can really be in a great new era. But the other painting, fresco, it's an Italian fresco. It's at the Duomo in Florence. And it's by Domenico di Michelino, painted around 1320. And no, he wrote, no, sorry, it's actually 1465, but we see Dante here. He's holding his Divine Comedy, written about 1320. It was completed then. And so what you have here is, it's the story of Dante's journey, the journey of his soul from hell to purgatory into heaven. And we might be going through a period like this. And so I put heaven or hell, because in a sense, the metaverse is something we have to build, and it reflects our experience and vision of the world. And so it's a challenging moment. And how it turns out is really going to be a question of our creativity. But there's a lot of fear. As much as there's excitement with the metaverse, there's a lot of fear, because it could be a kind of a hell on earth if we become so detached from reality. How it connects with reality will be very important. So now I'm going to move to the next slide and read one little poem, and then I'm going to introduce the speakers, our three speakers. So this is cyber identity. I feared you wouldn't come back, disappeared or hacked, lost in cyberspace, no trace, can't see your face. Send me a text, let me know what's next, perplexed, vexed. Is your cyber identity dead? Nothing read, nothing said, no, no, no. I don't want to let go. Send me a sign, you're still mine, still online. Send me a kiss, a wish, a dream, last seen, don't know. When will we love again? Lost in cyberspace, no interface, database down, lost, not found in the metaverse. Is the real story life in purgatory, locked down in the metaverse for better or worse? Okay. So here are our three speakers. The first speaker will be Jonathan Bowen. And you can see he'll be talking about Expo 2020 Dubai, Metaverse of the World. Then we have Chris Michaels, and from the National Gallery, Creative R&D in Time of Change. And our third speaker, after a little break, will be Carl Smith. And he's exploring the challenges of open metaverse. So we have a really wonderful program set out for you. And so I want to call Jonathan. He will be our first speaker.
Thanks, Tula.
Okay, yes. Okay.
Okay, hello and very nice to see you all here. I hope people online can hear me. If you type into the chat if there's any issues online, we can try and do something about it, but I hope everyone here can hear at least. And it's very nice to see people in reality, non-metaverse, back to reality. So actually my talk is about Expo 2020, because although it says 2020, it was actually 2021-22. And I go out to Expo, to Dubai and UAE quite a lot, looking at university degree programs. And I was hoping, yes, this is my opportunity to see Expo 2020. But of course, then COVID happened, Expo 2020 delayed, all meetings online on Zoom and so on. So I thought I'll never get there, but then fortunately they started having real meetings again, and I just got into Expo 2020 just right at the end. It started, I think, in October 2021 and finished at the end of March 2022. So I was there in the last month or so. And I call it Metaverse of the World, because actually, although, if you like, Expo 2020 isn't a technology in a normal sense, it is a sort of metaverse for reality. It's got 192 countries represented, so it's like the world in a tiny little area. I say tiny, it's actually larger than Monaco, so it's quite a big site. It's bigger than some small countries. So this is some of my experiences at Expo 2020 with regard to the metaverse. They do have their own metaverse app and so on as well. So we'll see sort of real metaverse and then the fake real world metaverse as well. But I thought I'd just start, because I'm the first speaker, thinking about what is the metaverse. So I always like to look at definitions and so on. So this was a definition online saying, it's a virtual reality space where people can interact. So any space like that where you've got people interacting with virtual reality is deemed to be a metaverse. I mean, actually, if you look further back on Wikipedia, for instance, it really started out of science fiction and so on. I guess before there was actually any metaverses in existence, but people were saying what it might be like in science fiction with metaverses. And also, as well as virtual reality, actually augmenting real reality as well, putting the two together. But of course, now that sort of meaning has slightly disappeared, and we really just think of it as any 3D virtual world where we can actually interact with other people. So yes, this is where the original novel, where it came from, Snow Crash in 1992. It's a combination of meta and universe. So there have obviously been, the developments are basically because we're getting a lot faster computers, and we can now do a lot more with virtual reality and so on than we could back in 1992 anyway. You'll hear other buzzwords like Web3 and so on associated with it. They're all buzzwords. We'll talk a little bit about them. I mean, there are various concerns like privacy online, people getting addicted to being online rather than in reality. Is it safe, etc. So these are just the, where does it come from? Meta, meaning something referring to itself, self-referential and so on. Then universe, well, originally, of course, universe has an astronomical meaning the whole, everything we know about in the terms of real matter and so on. I guess perhaps our metaverse is more in this, in logic and philosophy and so on. a universe is thought of as a particular sphere of activity, and I guess that's probably more what Metaverse is in now when we create metaverses, rather than trying to emulate the whole universe. Of course, in museums, they're like metadata, so we have meta being used for different meanings. So this is just data about data, especially in museums. So that's just an example of metadata underneath the quotes real data. I mentioned Web3. Well, again, this is just another buzzword, but it's being associated with the metaverse. Again, coined by somebody from Ethereum. So I guess it's quite money oriented. You know, it's looking at blockchain technology and economics and decentralizing the way all these things work. So the other thing I like to do is use, if you haven't used Google Books Ngrams, it's quite fun to just look at words in that and see how they've changed over. Well, they go all the way back centuries, in fact, but obviously something like Metaverse doesn't start to get mentioned till about, 92, that's 92 when it was in the book. Well, you can see there was a sort of peak around 2008-9, and now it's sort of going up again. So these things sort of come and go. But you can lie with reality or with this thing, because you can smooth the curve out. If you do that looking at a sort of 3-year range, you don't get this double peak. And if you do it over 6 years, we seem to be on the up all the time. So depending on how you want to present the statistics, you can decide how you want mentions of metaverse to look. Of course, we had this Second Life that was around in 2003, and it's still there, but it's sort of, I guess that's probably why that was that little peak for 2008, because that was probably the peak of Second Life, I'm guessing. So that certainly exists, but now we're talking about other metaverses, not just Second Life. As Tula mentioned, Facebook is rebranding itself to Meta. If you go and look on their website, they're building the evolution of this and so on. So that's certainly got things going, because if some company like Facebook says it's all metaverse, and people sit up and take notice. So just look at all the things associated with metaverse. So virtual reality is one of the main things. Again, there is a definition, which is basically just having a virtual world, completely virtual, with 3D things going on and people interacting and so on, hopefully. Again, well, virtual reality seems to have peaked quite early. I think it's in 1995 we were all doing virtual reality things. I think partly because if you remember back then, VRML appeared. So I think that's why it got mentioned a lot. VRML sort of, well, it doesn't seem so relevant now, but it still exists. So that caused this peak then of people talking about virtual reality. And now, of course, we have augmented reality, so we can combine what we've got here and then try and add virtual things to it. So here's a typical example of that with a smartphone and so on. And again, well, that's more on the up. So virtual reality has peaked, but maybe now we're all doing augmented reality. And these are the dates for that. So augmented reality, again, came in about the same time as metaverse and virtual reality and so on. But I think now it's having more effect, mainly because the technology is now much improved. And then we've got mixed reality, is sort of trying to combine all these things together. Again, that's on the up in terms of being mentioned. Again, that's been around since 1990 or so, this term. Now I've noticed extended reality is coming in. So I think people just like adding all these buzzwords. That again, seems to be just combining all these ideas of augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, putting them all into one. So I don't know if that's going to catch on. It's not in the dictionary online yet, so it's new. It's in Wikipedia at least, but I suspect it's going to be in the dictionary soon. And of course, behind all this, we've got AI, which has been developing, and that's helped a lot with metaverse, virtual reality. The things you can do with artificial intelligence now get to be quite interesting. There's the definition. I guess, again, looking at mentions of it, we can look back to 1950 when Alan Turing published on, he didn't call it AI, he called it machine intelligence at that time. But then people like John McCarthy and so on had a conference in '56, and that was where AI was coined. You can see it's still not being mentioned very much. But then we have, that's 1982, where the 5th generation came in. So any of you who remember the 80s, suddenly Japan started pouring in tons of money in improving technology, and the rest of the world all got worried because is Japan going to overtake us? In fact, it didn't happen. They put in a lot of money and nothing too much happened, but you can see there was a peak of mentioning AI at that point in 1987. That was when this 5th generation project was really going. And it was quite good here because we actually got some money out of Alvi and so on, so the government did respond. And now, of course, we've got machine learning and so on, so AI is definitely on the up again with these new techniques. So back in the 80s, we were just using logic programming and so on, and really with new machine learning has made things a lot more effective with AI. So these are the sort of things where combining AI and augmented reality. So you can have your app to make yourself look beautiful, or you can be doing things with robots. It's more serious, but there's lots of applications where AI and and AR are being combined. Probably you don't even know, but on some of your apps, there's AI doing things. And certainly Google is doing AI things and so on, but they don't make a big thing of it. So now we're off to the real world, Dubai. Well, it's not real, it's full like Las Vegas, but less guns and less, so it's slightly safer. But as well as Expo, there's lots of other things going on in Dubai that are quite technology oriented. There's tons of money floating about. I mean, this is my hotel that I stay at normally. They use the whole hotel for projecting huge things to go with this laser display with fountains and so on. So yes, if you happen to be in one of the rooms, you've got this thing shining in on you. I think they have a sort of mesh that stops it being too bad. But yes, if you do stay here, I highly recommend staying in that bit on the left where you can see a nice view over Dubai with the Burj Khalifa and so on, rather than the one where they're projecting the stuff on. But there's other things going on there. I went to this show where the whole thing is incredibly technology oriented with combining real people. You can see tiny little people there, but huge displays of things and real water coming in and going out as well. So the whole thing is a combination of real things and projected things. In the Dubai Mall, which is the biggest, huge mall there, they've got this display where they've got, this is all AI generated art. It's all constantly changing. These are just screenshots or shots of it. Sadly, I missed this, but they did have a very nice Van Gogh experience, which is all around the world as well. So I think there's one in London, etc. So I'm rather sad that had just finished before I got there, but this is what it looked like. But they do also have this theatre of digital art there. So actually, it's in a shopping mall that isn't so well known, so it's not actually, I mean, I went there and there was hardly anyone there, which is quite nice for me, because you've literally got all this virtual reality art happening, and it's all for you. So this display on the, am I making that noise? Yes. This display on the right there, it's a big auditorium, and you're sitting there and you can look around seeing all these things. So that opened in 2020, so I guess COVID has obviously affected that quite a lot. But anyway, now we'll go to Expo, which is, this is the central dome in Expo, the Al Wasl Plaza. So, and there they have all these amazing displays. It's constantly changing color and so on. So it's especially good at night. So sorry you can't, well, it's all still there. But actually, in the Iranian pavilion, I saw this carpet there, which looks exactly like the dome. So I don't know if that was a carpet was something that's influenced the design of the dome. And well, they've got robots going around following you, offering information. You can try and avoid them, but I think the best thing was there are various places for real coffee. So if you ever go to an expo in the future, head for Kenya, 'cause literally they were doing barista coffee for £1 a cup. It was wonderful. So I'm having trouble with the microphone. I don't know if that. So the Expo does have various apps and websites and so on associated with it. So these are just some of the websites. There's the official website, and there's a virtual expo that you can go around with sort of virtual reality. And obviously there's Wikipedia and the tourist website, Visit Dubai. So there's lots of stuff online that you can still go to, so you can still go and see virtual reality versions of Expo. There's also apps, one of which is a Metaverse app, this Explorer app. So I think there's still people on there. You might go and meet someone there, possibly. Interestingly, there's this Dubai police one, which I'll show you, which is basically how fast can you drive around in virtual reality. So, seems a bit odd, the police encouraging you to drive fast, but anyway. So this is the virtual Expo Dubai. Well, this is on the website, in fact. So you can zoom around. That's a view from an aerial view of the site. It's in this sort of almost like a flower with petals and so on, with the different areas. It can convert to nighttime view. In some ways, nighttime is better, I would say. And, well, this is a view of the Metaverse. This is the entrance in Metaverse. Well, I'll show you a few real things, especially, but this is the fake view. I'm going to just literally flip through these because I've got a lot of slides. So you're going to have a little slideshow. The sustainability is a big thing. So this is the sustainability pavilion. It has that's all solar cells on top, so it just generates its own energy and so on. That's the German pavilion, we'll come back to the real German pavilion, which was very good, but it had huge queues because yes, one nice thing was I was over 60 going to it, and they were very nice to people over 60 at most pavilions. Sadly, not at the German one, so this is the one I had to queue for. So most of the others I could swan in and say I'm very old and infirm. Yeah. So obviously United Arab Emirates had an amazing pavilion. Most of these ones I'm showing you, I'll show you the real pavilion a little bit later. But this again, I think, was based on a flower with petals and things. This is the center, the Al Wasl Plaza. So this is right in the middle, getting darker. And then, yes, you can go into various pavilions in this metaverse. So this one with robots and so on. So you can wander around this, and if there are other people online, you might meet them as well. So this is the Dubai Police game. So you can always say new game, and then they seem to have built it around Expo in 2075, which I guess I'm not going to make. Some of you might be there, when it's all going to be Martian and so on by that time. So. Again, these are just a few shots, but it's essentially a racing game. I suppose that's the reality there, because there's a lot of sheikhs' sons driving around in very fast cars, which you have to avoid, and the police won't stop them because obviously it's the sheikh, and you don't bother the sheikh. The rest of us are being monitored on video constantly and are just driving very sensibly. So you have to imagine you're part of the sheikh's family for this one, I think. And obviously it's the usual, well, I suppose not that unusual, but it's just racing around on a racetrack and so on. You can bump into the sides, etc. So then perhaps more interesting is the Explorer app, which is, so this is an app which is doing a sort of metaverse of Expo, and that's still there. Because sadly, when I went to Expo, I had a very old phone, and it told me your technology isn't good enough to do any of this stuff. So, they had 5G, which my phone wouldn't do. They had the metaverse things, which my phone wouldn't do. But anyway, I now have a new phone. So for this, I'm able to show you what you see. And essentially, the whole of Expo has been created in this metaverse with dragons and things as well that you can meet along the way, which aren't in the real metaverse, but in the real Expo. So, you've got various options that you can do, looking for various treasures, quests and so on. So you can do set games, or you can just wander around as you do in the Expo itself. So there's quite a lot of options to play with in this Explorer app. obviously you have to create your avatar. I think I was slightly boring. Yes, this was my choice. Yes, I did go for the right-hand one, but yeah, I'm afraid I just very quickly created myself. Here I am as a guest. So, and then obviously once you're in there, then well, that's me in the middle, but that's just the numbers of people in different parts of this metaverse. So maybe you want to go for that 142 one, because that's obviously where the action is happening. There's lots of other people there. Yeah, it takes a bit of time loading up on your phone. Certainly if you've got a phone you want to be warmed up, it warms up your phone very nicely, because it's doing a lot of work in your phone when you run it. These are just various screenshots of me wandering around, so at night time, going to the dome. Basically, you normally start at the dome, because then you can go, it's a bit like the pyramid at the Louvre, it's the place to start to go anywhere. So here's a couple of pavilions, including the UK pavilion, which I'll come back to the UK pavilion, because there is some AI and so on involved with that. And the sustainability Spanish pavilion, etc., UAE pavilion. So you can also go and look for various treasures within this. I haven't done all of this, but anyway, there are these different options of things to do. You can also, if you want to give money, I think you can, they have various good causes that you can help with as well. So I'll just keep going. Yes, you can visit individual pavilions. I think they've especially set up some pavilions for looking at. That's the UAE one there. So back to the just a few screenshots wandering around this metaverse. Yes, things sort of appear. This one is actually going through a special little story, so you can talk to people and do things. So this is just the sort of interactions you have within this metaverse. Yes, and things appear like that, and you can earn seeds, etc. Yes, pledged. So I've got a lot of slides, so that's why I'm doing a sort of slideshow for parts of it like this. Back to the metaverse from that little game there. Certainly, well, navigating, you can use your thumbs to sort of move around. So right thumb and left thumb for getting around this metaverse. There are things you can do there that you can activate. Here we are going round. Well, this bit's quite nice, because it really does do all the displays they do in the real dome. So certainly if you sit there in the metaverse, the display is happening, and you can look around and see all this nice projections and so on. So you can see the colours change. It's quite impressive. The real one's very impressive, because it's a huge dome, and that's still going to be there. So I think they're opening up the site. If you do go to Dubai, it's probably still worth going to see what's left of Expo. So different colours, red, etc. So it's a constant. This is sort of gradually changing constantly when you're inside, and that's just a general view looking around, so you get an idea of the scale. I think there is somebody, a real avatar somewhere down there. I didn't actually go and talk to him. Yes, so there was somebody else there in this metaverse. Then back to daylight. Well, I'm going to just take you on a little walk, because I knew where the UK pavilion was in the real Expo, so I thought, well, I'll try and get to the UK pavilion in the metaverse, see if I can do that. So there are all these long walkways there, and obviously covered, because in reality you're in sort of 40 degrees centigrade heat, so it was quite well covered to make sure you didn't get too hot outside. So most of the walkways had this, and you can see there in the distance there's the UK pavilion coming up on the left there. So this is it. And this, we'll come back to it, but essentially this was using a lot of AI to do it. There's a poem on there, which I'll show you the real one a bit later. So, and you can type in your own words, and then the AI decides, well, I'll put all these words together and try and make some poetry out of it. Obviously most of it's nonsense, but it does quite well at coming up with some ideas. And that's gone a little bit past the UK pavilion, but now on the right here, I'm quite glad to say we were right next to the Ukrainian pavilion. So this is the Ukrainian pavilion. Again, I'll show you the real pavilion a bit later. I guess you wouldn't know it's the Ukrainian pavilion in Metaverse, but in reality, once certain political things had happened, yes, it became, lots of flags, etc. In the real expo, you could have a little passport to collect stamps, and you can do that in the Metaverse as well, I guess, with digital stamps instead. So, you find these little markers, and you say, yes, I've been here. So there is also an augmented reality aspect to it. Yeah. So I thought I'd better have a go with that because we're talking about augmented reality as well as virtual reality. So yes, well, I guess, I didn't do very much with it, but there was this thing that appears in virtual reality. That's just the view out of my study window, so it's not very, it's real view behind and this thing in front. Perhaps more interestingly, I've now got a very nice, the original artwork of the book on Turing that I co-wrote. I've now got sitting in front of me in my desk, which I like. Thank you very much, Graham, for printing it out. He's got a very good printer, so if anyone needs things beautifully printed out, Graham's the person to go and see. But I thought it was appropriate having Turing behind this augmented reality example. So now we'll go to the real expo, which I think is still a sort of metaverse, but it's a sort of real metaverse. So they did have 192 countries participating, including Israel, but also, of course, Palestine, which they look on slightly differently to other countries. But anyway, they're certainly in the UAE and most Arabic countries, they look on Palestine as being a country. So they had their own pavilion too. But at least, things are softening up a bit in that you can now fly between Israel and Dubai and so on. So that's nice. Things are getting slightly less tense in that sense. And there's a real view of the site. So you can see there in the center is the dome, and then you basically go out to these different zones. They've got, or districts. They've got the mobility zone, the opportunity, and the sustainability zone. To be honest, I don't know whether there was much. They had these districts, and there was a big pavilion for each of these, but I think the countries were probably pretty mixed up with which district they were in. So yes, back to I'm going to give you a few examples of pavilions at the site. So I'm afraid, yes, I've obviously chosen the UK as one of them. So it's got this set, hopefully you can see some of the words there. So anyone can go in and type in a short phrase or word into this thing, and it will then go into the AI system, and it will jumble it up how it thinks will produce something that it thinks is poetry. I guess, well, there it is at night when you can actually read the words even better. But, well, that's just an extract of one of the pictures where it says, not sure what I am, except that it feels like being an amicable dream. So I think Tula could have written that, couldn't you? I don't know. Anyway, that's the sort of thing it produces, and you can then work out whether it actually means anything. To be honest, outside, yes, architecturally it's very interesting. I was talking to an architect, he thought it's the best pavilion architecture-wise, but then you go in and there's sort of nothing in it. It's literally a big space, and you can see the AI thing backwards there. So I guess, it did have a nice lead up with an exhibition, but then you go in and there's not much to see compared to a lot of the other pavilions. So I mentioned the German pavilion, which was, very, very impressive. Essentially, you had a badge with RFID and so on, so it knew your name wherever you were. So you have to not mind being monitored, but then it'll, come up with various displays mentioning you. So certainly in the big display, one of the big displays where you'll sit on swings and lots of virtual reality happening around you with your names of everyone there appearing. You can try and spot your name and so on. So it was probably worth the way. I mean, there were literally 2-hour queues for some of these things. So, I'm very glad I didn't have to do that for most of them, but I did do it for the German pavilion. This was the last pavilion I went to because I was holding out. Okay. So the Italian pavilion had a lot on, it's a very sustainable pavilion, but I think the thing I liked was that they've actually had a reproduction of Michelangelo's David scanned from the original, very high resolution scanning. So, obviously it looks almost identical. I think one thing you won't notice normally, because on this you were standing right up to his head very close. So you can see he's got heart-shaped eyes and so on, which you probably wouldn't. I never knew he had that before because you're so far away you don't notice, but this you could look up close. And I suppose interestingly, culturally, obviously we know David isn't wearing very much. I mean, Victorian times, there is, if you go to the V&A, they've still got the piece of the leaf to put over the things that you can clip on, but now he doesn't normally wear that anymore. But of course, in UAE, they're still fairly conservative. So actually, we're standing up at the top. I managed to lean over the balcony to see what's going on down there. And they do have a VIP area where you can go down to the more interesting sections and look up close if you want, but I wasn't VIP enough to do that. So the Japan pavilion, again, was hugely popular. Basically, this pavilion was totally booked out for the entire expo because not many people were allowed in at once, but they did have some pretty interesting AR, VR type things going on. Well, I guess I was just lucky that I was standing in a queue and somebody turned around and said, "Are you on your own?" And I sort of, you wonder, am I being propositioned? But no, well, I said, yes, I am. And then he said, well, I've just got a spare ticket to go to the Japan thing tonight. So very kindly, that's giving the ticket and so on. So yes, they had some pretty amazing displays in that. But the only way to get it was to have a friend or be very organized. I guess the Saudi pavilion was pretty impressive. I think it's the second largest after the UAE. I suppose you'd expect it to be, being in Dubai. But the whole of that bottom area there, has got displays going on, which you can stand under. It's also sort of like a mirror, so you look up and you can see yourself standing there as well as these projections. So that's what it looks like. They have people dancing and so on underneath, with things going on above as well. So that's outside, but then you go in and there's the projection again, but inside there's had some amazing VR experiences. This is also 3D there on the right, with constantly changing again, and the floor doing things as well. As you stand on it, you get little, it's like standing in water, you can make little footprints and so on. So that was one of the most impressive pavilions. Obviously UAE had to have the biggest pavilion, you'd expect that. But they had real sand. So literally we went in this huge pavilion and they basically moved the desert in there. But then the sand, they've got projections on it, so there's VR things happening as well down there. I guess US is obviously highly technological, but certainly a little bit of advert style. So obviously they had Steve Jobs well, he wasn't there, but he was there in virtual reality. This is just talking about the first iPhone and so on, starting in 2007. But they had some quite interesting displays, and of course they've got real moon rock, so you can go and touch your moon rock and so on. I guess you'd expect China to have a pretty impressive display, but I suppose it's more technology oriented rather than arts oriented. So there's things like this with train simulators and so on. And the Singapore one, again, not so much technology, but very green. So the whole thing was, vegetation everywhere, as you can see there. So as you walk around, you're completely surrounded by, and it's still microclimate there as well. So it's a sort of parallel universe, as I said, or a metaverse, if you like. But whilst I was there, this happened. So that rather changes your perspective on life. This was just, literally happening one of the days in reality, with tanks coming in and people trying to escape and all that sort of thing. And you go to the Russian pavilion, and no effect. I had to very surreptitiously take this picture with a Ukrainian flag on that you can see there, because people would lead you away if you were doing anything overtly political. But anyway, I managed to snap one. Anyway, their theme is cooperation. Yes, so you're all going to cooperate. I mean, it's when you put this in front of it that you realise what they really mean by cooperation. So, but you know, you literally wouldn't have known anything was happening at the Russian pavilion in real life. You know, just ignored completely. So it's all from Russia with love. It depends what sort of love you're talking about. It's tough love, I guess. And open your heart to Moscow. So I put a black heart there because I think that's what it is. But you know, reading all the, I mean, I was at two minds whether to go into the thing because you know, but I thought, well, I'd better go in and see what's happening there. So I think of it as propaganda reality, or PR, as we know it. So obviously, you know, incredibly, well, just ignoring what's going on in reality, essentially. That's a nice, well, that's actually from 2016 there with Van Gogh there. But anyway, people demonstrating. So now we go to the Ukraine pavilion, which is rather different. You know, as soon as this happened, the flags went up and so on. So somebody outside holding up a flag, etc. I think this is literally on the evening of it all happening. You know, and hashtag with Ukraine and so on. So every display had a QR code to do things and so on, and they're handing out flags and ribbons. You can wear nice Ukrainian coloured ribbons and so on. So I thought perhaps, well, with this happening, we're obviously interested in arts and culture. You know, what's actually happening in Ukraine at the moment with their culture. So, well, this is a poster at the railway station in the capital. I think it sort of sums up the situation we're in. Sadly, with little baby Putin coming on after two other people who didn't really help Europe very much in the 20th century. So let's hope he doesn't grow up and get even worse. I mean, we've had our fair share of problems. If you go to the Tate and so on, you know, there's still lots of war damage around, and the V&A similarly. It's all been left as a sort of reminder that, you know, wars happen and things get damaged. Fortunately, I don't think we got as damaged as things are happening in Ukraine. So, you know, there's a lot of, you know, whether they're deliberately targeting things, there certainly is looting going on, collections, a bit like happened in Iraq and so on. So, you know, very sad that all this stuff is being destroyed and lost. If you go onto Wikipedia, you know, they're actually maintaining a list of things that are happening there. It's mainly UNESCO who's actually monitoring what's going on there, but Wikipedia is reflecting that. Of course, there's the Hague Convention on what's meant to happen with cultural property and so on. It's whether, you know, whether Russia is respecting that is for you to decide. But, and it has lists. So I mean, I'm particularly interested in museums, but these are the numbers that have been basically either destroyed or damaged, you know, during the war since February. Well, this is in May, so it's presumably worse now, but including 11 museums. And of course the theatre in Mariupol and so on is destroyed, etc. And sadly, lots of life lost. And this is just some of the museums that have been either destroyed or badly damaged. So you know, one museum that has gone. I don't know. You know, I suppose there's nothing left. So you know, sad, but anyway, that's going on. That's reality. I mean, I thought about other cultural metaverses in the world. So I think about Expo as a sort of metaverse, but what you can try and think of what other examples are there. So I've got a couple for you. So I think Glastonbury is a metaverse. You know, it's a different world. So metaverse that's been around for 50 years. Okay, it only lasts for a few days, but you know, you go into a different reality and do things slightly differently, things you wouldn't do in the real world sometimes. And of course, well, I've been to Old Jerusalem. I think of that as a metaverse for the world because, you know, you've got these different quarters with a Jewish quarter, Muslim quarter, Christian, Armenian, and so on. And you can literally walk around. It's like walking around the world if you haven't been there. You literally go into different quarters and there's a different atmosphere. And the Jews obviously tend not to want to go into the Muslim quarter, etc. So, but that's a metaverse that's been around for 5,000 years. It's a much older metaverse. and changed a lot during that time. So you can try thinking of other metaverses if you like, and we can discuss. Yeah. Sorry? Disney, oh yes, you're right, yes, but I didn't want to lower the tone. I'm trying to think of cultural, no, sorry. Yes, no, but I agree, that is an equivalent. So just a little bit, the future, I mean, if you get to Dubai, I'd highly recommend going to this brand new museum opened this year. Fortunately, this was a view from my hotel room, so it was the hotel room didn't used to have a very nice view, but now they've built this amazing building opposite. That's all Arabic on it, which is a saying by the ruler of Dubai about the future and so on. Sadly, I didn't actually get in, apart from going into the foyer, yes, it's booked up about 10 days in advance. So if you do go to Dubai and want to do this, make sure you book ahead before you go. I'll probably go to it next time. I think we do quite well here. You know, I thought the concert at Buckingham Palace was pretty good with the drones doing all these things in the sky and projections onto Buckingham Palace. So I guess it's all, I'm afraid it's all very British style now. But anyway, I thought that was a good evening. So anyway, this is just thinking about is the future human? I don't know, or is it going to be artificial? And how are we going to combine the two? I don't know. That's for the discussion time in the second half of this session. So anyways, thank you very much. Probably we decided it's best not to have a lot of questions between talks because we're going to have a very long discussion session. So if you've got something to ask, do write it down or memorize it. We're literally going to have about 40-minute discussion time, or up to 40 minutes. So that's probably the best time to do that, because I don't know if I overstayed my welcome. But anyway, I'll hand over to our next speaker, Chris Michaels, who isn't going to depend on any of this technology. I can leave this up as a background if you like for the talk, but I'll say thank you, Chris. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks. Oh, yes, if you want to use the handheld, that's fine.
Thank you. Does that? Yeah, that works. Okay. Hi everyone. We'll leave this slide up. Probably the main thing you'll learn from this speech is how deeply I distrust technology.
Yeah.
And that goes as far as not even creating slides for speeches, because it always goes wrong in some horrific way at some point. So my name is Chris Michaels. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I think this is the first time I've spoken in public since COVID, so it's nice to see some people in the real world, and I know there are some people in some version of a virtual world out there, so nice to be here. I am Director of Digital Communications and Technology at the National Gallery. Makes it hard if you're so distrustful of technology, if you have responsible both for the things we do in the digital world and the technology that powers it. So, and I'm also a visiting senior research fellow at King's College London. I spent the last year as a fellow for the Arts and Humanities Research Council, crafting a business case for an investment in what we're probably now calling the Metaverse, called CoStar, which I'll talk about a little about later. And what I wanted to talk about today then really is a project I've been running for the last nearly 3 years now, which I'm going to sort of frame today as a Metaverse era project. Wasn't designed as such, and we'll get to the kind of logic as to why. But this project, National Gallery X, is something that we launched in September 2019 that kind of has been looking at all the themes, practices, and processes that I think will help us define the metaverse, and has been a kind of story, if you like, about the journey we're going to have to make. Tula said very well, we're going to have to build the metaverse in a way with NGX in its very, very small fashion. There's a story about how difficult that building process is and all the things we didn't expect as we went on the journey along the way. I'm very pleased to see Afra and Olive here from Art in Flux. Olive is from Art in Flux, for Annalima Group, who are a huge part of this story. So I might just ask them to chip in at some times to talk about the things we've all been through together. So last night when I was thinking about this speech, my wife asked, my wife explained to my wife what I was doing today, and she said, kind of, well, what is the metaverse? She's a barrister, so she doesn't have to care about this stuff whatsoever. And my son walked into the room, he's like, I know what the metaverse is. It's boring Fortnite. And I thought that's not the worst definition I've ever heard. But I tried to explain it to her that for me, and just so you understand my definition of it, the metaverse is the maturation of a series of technologies that we've been working with, seeing grow over the last 15, sometimes 20, sometimes 30 years, that now through the injection of kind of marketing, financial capital, and a kind of a moment in time are reaching a kind of convergence point over the next 5 to 10 years. So of course, artificial intelligence is one of those pieces. As we've seen with Jonathan's talk, the power of different forms of mixed, extended, whatever the hell you want to call it this morning, reality are part of that. Virtual worlds, as someone who was playing Grand Theft Auto back in 1995, I think that was probably still just about the best virtual world, albeit the most morally ambiguous. Virtual worlds, definitely part of the story. 5G is an underlying powering technology, and the development of 6G, part of the story. The cloud, all this different stuff, it's kind of coming together. And that coming together of things that were frankly separate up until this point, to me, defines the narrative of what the metaverse will be. That's both deeply troubling in some of the implications it has, but a huge opportunity. So, and as I said, NGX in its very small way has been trying to kind of explore what happens as those things emerge and come together. So, what is National Gallery X? Well, it's an innovation lab. It's part of the National Gallery, but sort of to the side and outside, and again, I'll come back to describe it. And it's a story of kind of trying to bring together research, art, and technology in new and interesting ways. Its narrative, as I said, is full of plot twists. Pretty much everything from the moment we open has been a kind of twist of the unexpected. And so in a way, I want to kind of think about it as a symbol of how difficult it is to predict the future, which again is problematic because it was a lab I specifically set up to try and predict the future. So again, one of the things you'll learn is that I am rubbish about thinking what the future looks like. So back to the beginning. I've been at the National Gallery now for just over 5 years. I joined in 2017. My responsibility sits across a whole wide range of areas, but fundamentally what I'm there to do is bring about digital transformation. That's in the way that we communicate to our audiences, in the technologies that we use, and in the kind of the way that digital's adopted through the organization. So across the remit of that, that means thinking about things like digital learning, things like the digitization of our collections and the way they're presented, about the systems and processes we use, about the way we use audience data. And I kind of describe it that the thing we're building is a digital museum. Some of it not sort of super sexy and metaversey, some of it kind of deeply practical and everyday, but the parts that we put together of infrastructure, of people, of process, of technology, the way that we see technology adopted across different business areas, and the way that we try and tell stories, to me, kind of shapes a digital museum. But trying to do digital in a nearly 200-year-old organization has to be in part a story about how you drive and adopt and use innovation, because places like museums don't innovate very much. Their brilliance in some ways is they don't need to. They can be glacial and kind of smooth through the universe without having to change too much. And that's not a bad thing. But if you are going to try and exist in a digitized and digitizing world, then adopting innovation in some form, to me, seemed a critical thing. This reached a kind of a moment where in 2019, I kept being asked the question by our then very brilliant chair, Hannah Rothschild, where she would kind of turn to me in meetings and say, well, look, Chris, we're thinking about what the gallery is going to do in 2030. What does the digital future look like? And it's a horrible question when very senior people ask you that, because the only answer is I have absolutely no idea. And people don't like it when you tell them you don't know the answer to questions, because they're kind of paying you money to know things. And so the gallery kind of thinks in the long term. We do building projects that last 4 or 5 years. We plan exhibitions 5 years ahead. We're thinking about our 3rd century and the things it means for the world. And of course, digital, that kind of constantly shifting, changing thing that's kind of happening out there, whilst we know it's shaping the wider environment, actually what it means beyond tomorrow, I find often very difficult to say. And so I kind of went back to an idea I first had when I was working at the British Museum, where I was before the National Gallery, of kind of forming some kind of innovation lab to think about the future. I come from the creative industries beforehand, and if you look across industry, of course, innovation labs are a very standard way to think about the future. If I understand the history right, they go back to kind of German chemicals companies in the beginning of the 20th century, where there was a need to kind of think about out loud about what the future looks like. But they haven't really been adopted very much in the arts and culture, all sectors. Even frankly, that much in the kind of wider creative industries. And so when I was back at the British Museum, I saw this kind of opportunity, which I never quite grasped, to use the reading room there, kind of unused, brilliant brain at the center of the universe, to found an innovation lab. And I was kind of trying to make it happen. And then I got offered a new job at the National Gallery, so the whole thing fell apart. But then 2 years into the story, into the journey at the gallery, things were going well, starting to get some credibility, good stuff was happening. A moment of opportunity arose. So if you know the National Gallery, it's a building that faces onto Trafalgar Square, but also faces kind of slightly backwards towards Leicester Square. The back of the gallery, on a slightly untrafficked street called Orange Street, is a space that I think holds lots of potential new uses for us. We own a building next to the National Gallery called St Vincent's House, one of the ugliest buildings in London, I would definitely say. You would call it brutalist in the 1960s style if that didn't give it some credibility in the way that it was designed. But it was a building we bought in the 1980s with a kind of long-term view, again, galleries are all about long-term views, towards kind of building some great new wing of the gallery in the future. Last time we costed it, that probably cost about £1 billion, so it's not happening anytime very, very soon. Lots of money. But there's a restaurant at the bottom of it called Salt and Pepper. Curry house, not a very good curry house, and not very many people went there. Sometime in the past it had been a tapas bar, but because Orange Street, despite the fact it's between these two kind of hugely popular places, really has no one walking down it, no one really went there. And so it went bust. And so with a new hotel, the Londoner, a very kind of grand hotel being built on the road opposite, this restaurant was kind of causing the gallery's trust and foundation, which owned the building, problem. Couldn't get any rent for it. What the hell are we going to do with it? No one really wants it. So to me, that was a moment of opportunity to say, well, look, give it to me. We're doing good stuff in digital here, and I'll do something interesting with it. My actual first plan was to start a kind of co-working cafe that kind of creatives could come and hang out in, and we'd kind of see what happened. It wasn't the best idea I ever had. But then kind of talking to a great friend of mine, Ali Husseini, artist, researcher and thinker, we kind of came back to this talk about an innovation lab space and thought that, look, NGX and a kind of program to think about the future could flourish in what was then an empty restaurant space. So I did some very good persuading of some good senior people and said, well, look, give it to me for a few years and we'll see what happens. We stripped the kind of banquette seating out. We tried to get rid of the kind of ingested smell of chicken tikka that had built up over a decade or so. I'm still not sure that we've ever quite exorcised the ghosts of that 10 years of kind of biryani cooking. And we stripped it out, painted it grey in the kind of grey where projections go on the wall, and said, well, look, here we can kind of think out loud about what tomorrow looks like. We went and talked to our friends and colleagues at King's College London, just down the road from us. If you know the gallery, King's College is basically down the street, as close neighbours as it's possible to get, and said, well, look, let's do this together. Let's kind of bring the things that you know as King's and bring the things that we know as the gallery and try and kind of intersect research, art and technology in a new way. And King's College London and Ali had been doing this actually in a brilliant way for about 4 or 5 years beforehand. A program there called Connected Culture, founded I think in 2017, had been one of these kind of great fermenting points about how the metaverse, as we might come to understand it, might be framed. So one of the kind of famous projects they did there was around 5G and the things that it can mean from the way performance and art might come together. So a brilliant professor called Misha Dolo, one of the kind of architects of 5G, now gone back to Ericsson to architect 6G, realized with Ali that you could kind of perform in 5G between different geographical locations. The kind of low latency of information distribution over 5G networks meant that basically he could play the piano in London, no, he could play the piano in Berlin, and his daughter, who's a brilliant singer, could sing in London, and they could sing and play together because the speed of information transmission meant that that performance had all the kind of normal virtues of kind of interaction between musicians that we would expect, but 800, 900 miles apart. And those kind of projects that Ali did there started to think about the use cases for kind of hyper advanced technologies and the way that they may be adopted into arts, performance and other kind of cultural activity. So there was a kind of grounding at King's, an opportunity at the gallery,
we brought it together and said, well, look, we're going to build this lab. So 3 or 4 months later, we opened. September 2019, full of great hopes for the future. We opened with a project bringing together exactly in this kind of model that we were starting to develop, researchers from King's, technology and artists. So a great professor there who works on immersive audio technology called Zoran Svetkovic brings this kind of widget that he's built for how immersive audio kind of distributes sound through a room. A brilliant composer brings a kind of performance using largely centered around a harpist, and a great sound producer called Keir Vine thinks about how those things come together. We used Turner's Range, Steam and Speed as inspiration. One of the great gallery masterworks, a kind of enormous comment on the kind of technologizing of the present and the future as this train kind of emerges from Turner's kind of visual foggy, mystical fog, chasing seemingly a rabbit or a rabbit chasing it into the kind of foreground. They created this piece of work that you knew at some point was going to introduce the train into the room. We built an immersive audio rig around the ceiling, and as you stood in the middle and the harpist played a slightly kind of abstract piece, you knew something was coming. And eventually, 3 minutes in, the train starts to rumble in the distance, and you kind of feel it coming. And then as it kind of, due to the brilliance of the software that Zoran created, when it emerges in the room, everyone jumps. So you have this kind of moment where you're standing in front of a kind of deep visualization of the painting, the sound and the music kind of comes together, and it's technology that's helping you kind of unlock a new story. It was everything we kind of thought that NGX could be, this kind of bringing together of different things in a new space. We were very lucky at that opening that Tim Berners-Lee, the only person in the world who can describe their job description as web inventor, came to kind of, it's not a bad job title actually, but only one man can have it, came to give the opening speech, and we were kind of off and running. And so, although innovation, of course, shouldn't just be about theatre, we'd kind of staged this great moment of kind of innovation theatre. And we thought this would kind of propel us towards a whole series of great things to come. The first commission we made for a residencies program was to Olive's Analima group. For those of you who know them or don't know them, they do phenomenal work at the intersection of digitization, technology, and visual art. Astonishing work. We commissioned them to kind of build on what we'd done before, to build a kind of installation inside the NGX space, to take paintings from the gallery, to decompose them into data, and then to put them back together in both visual and sonic landscapes. Is that a good description, Olive? If you have better words, you're welcome to throw them in. Anyway, we thought this was going to be kind of moment number 2 as we kind of sculpted the future for kind of innovation in museums. All the things we wanted to show there were kind of happening. This idea that I had in the back of my head of a kind of triple helix model was coming together. For any of you who know what a triple helix model is, it's an idea from Silicon Valley that when you put organizations, places like the museum, they mean businesses in the States, but places like the museum, academic research, and technology close to each other, amazing things happen. We're kind of starting to see the kind of intellectual context of this. We're starting to see also that this could be a kind of demonstration place for a whole wave of kind of creative R&D, as we're starting to call it in this country, a kind of definite way that things work together. And so we're starting to see an interesting open question kind of be formed. But of course, when you're starting to think about the future, every time you think about it, you think about the wrong thing, because what we didn't see was COVID. And so as we got past September and into January, we were just about to start installing the pieces that were going to put this brilliant installation inside National Gallery X, and then the world shut. And of course, suddenly we then have to think about a different story. And if you like, that's the main lesson, I think, both from NGX and for the Metaverse, is that trying to kind of define how the future happens just leaves you open to the risks and the inevitability of being wrong. So the Analima group were absolutely at the forefront of kind of this kind of rethinking of, okay, what the hell do we have to do when the physical world disappears altogether and there's only the virtual left? They did an amazing thing and an amazing pivot with and for us of kind of going from being a mixture of physical and virtual realities into just a digital space. in a very short space of time, what were designed to be projected installations in a room, designed for physical audiences to go and see and experience in a way that we kind of spent a brilliant amount of time kind of figuring out, became a series of video pieces distributed online as a 360-degree piece video work for YouTube. Other projects that we had in the running became having to kind of also had to go through a similar journey from being to be done there in that place with that space with those technologies on the wall and those people who can come to see it, to being for online. An augmented reality project that we designed with a brilliant group called Playlines, who've done phenomenal work about how you experience stuff in places, became about how you could experience a Titian show that we'd opened for a grand total of 4 days before COVID forced it to be shut down, and how you could experience those paintings in your own home environment. Of course, for those 3 or 4 months, we only had our own home environment. There was nowhere else to be. And across this period of time, more and more projects kept having to find ways to be online. I was brilliantly pleased to see when I walked into the BCS this morning, Art in Flux as your kind of exhibition. Well, I think no one's done more work with the Art in Flux than probably NGX has in the last few years. It's been an amazing partnership. And the journey with Art in Flux was to find out how to run virtual events. We kind of didn't really know what we were doing at the start, I think it's fair to say. No, you did, I didn't, we didn't. Art in Flux, who serve a London digital art community and have built an enormous community of people, we wanted to run a series of events, but we couldn't run them anymore in NGX for people in a space. We had to run them suddenly in the virtual world. And what we found there was that there's a kind of a building of narrative, a building of presentation, and a building of kind of the theatre of presentation that helps to tell that story. And again, over and over again, we kept having to find this different logic. In a robotics project that we ran, which was frankly in its conception all about getting this big goddamn robot that they had in King's into the National Gallery, we couldn't get the robot into the National Gallery because the National Gallery was closed. And so robot stays in lab and you just do project with the AI that runs it, which of course is absolutely where the learning comes from. You want to learn what the AI can do, but doesn't get you the photo opportunity that gets you in the Times of having the robot standing at the top of the stairs talking to people. So again, over and over, this kind of attempt to see how technology influences a real place like the gallery has to become about how technology influences a virtual place that only partially exists. And that, if you like, to me is a kind of lesson for the metaverse, is that the metaverse that Jonathan just showed is kind of operating at the interstice between physical and virtual. But as we know now, kind of uniquely for the first time, sometimes there will only be physical and sometimes there will only be virtual. And so how we kind of move between those spaces is in a way the main act of flexibility we need to learn. So COVID happened. Seems like a distant world, although as I said to Tula this morning, I fear it might be coming back a bit. Lots of people seem to be getting it at the moment. And I was in Germany the other week and they seem to be preparing for lockdown in the autumn. So don't think the story's over quite at this point. But anyway, COVID is behind us. And so we emerge from COVID, the gallery reopens fully. The gallery doesn't close very often. Even in Second World War, it was only closed for 2 weeks. So this is kind of historical moments in time. We think we can start getting our grip back on the future. We've been through this kind of enormous trauma, and let's see what the future looked like. And of course, we got it wrong again. Because as you emerge from COVID, what happens next? NFTs and the metaverse explode. And were we prepared really for this? Did we have our projects in hand? Was this sculpted onto our kind of view of the future? Absolutely not. We hadn't thought about NFTs. We hadn't really thought about the metaverse with the capital M itself, although we were definitely working at kind of underlying technologies. And so what do you do if you miss the future twice? There's definitely a quote from Oscar Wilde there about kind of the carelessness of it all. So whatever we're doing, kind of sculpting the horizon, we're not doing quite the right thing. But NFTs, of course, explode last year as this kind of new version of what a digital version of the art future might look like. A kind of odd thing that suddenly emerges. If you're someone like me and you work in an art gallery, you never had as many messages on LinkedIn as you did between February and June last year as 10 trillion NFT startups suddenly emerged from God only knows where, with a deep desire to sell JPEGs of Van Gogh paintings for billions of pounds on the internet. None of them have yet sold a JPEG of our Van Goghs, at least on the internet, although they have of others, and nor shall they, because it's not quite the very sensible thing to do. But of course, lots of other museums, the Uffizi, British Museum and others, have entered into that space and doing something. Whether they're making any money or gaining anything is for them to say. But again, another version of the future emerged, hyper-capitalized, hyper hyped as much as you could possibly dream anything to be, and we didn't quite see it. So we did jump on it. We thought we ought to do something about NFTs, but I wanted to play a kind of long game. I recognize that there's a fundamental mismatch in cultural heritage organizations between what NFTs are, which is serving a kind of Bitcoin heavy buyer audience with stuff that they want for themselves, kind of circulating Bitcoin and digital currency back to itself. These are not the same people that go to the National Gallery. People who go to the National Gallery are mostly white, in their 60s, wealthy, but not crypto wealthy. Normal wealthy, bank account wealthy, low interest rates, high levels of house ownership. They don't want NFTs. They might want them in 20 years' time, but they don't want them now. And so I asked one of the more interesting startups who came to us to think about a kind of what if situation. What if people in the future do want NFTs in our audience? What would we do with them? And we did some kind of use case thinking about it. And as we kind of came through this and started kind of thinking and rethinking what all of this meant, the thing that we started to see was that really for National Gallery X, and really I think for all of us at this kind of build it moment, it wasn't it wasn't what we were building, and it wasn't why we were building, and because the why we're always going to be slightly wrong with, but it was kind of how we were building that was really the critical piece. So as we started and continued to work on National Gallery X projects, one of the things that came through it was a need to kind of commission differently. We started working in a kind of small network way. We talked to people we know and got them to work on projects with us. We kind of started hitting a barrier with it where we knew we were kind of only hitting people we know. And we weren't getting towards the future because we were trying to shape what the future looks like. So what we started to develop was a kind of methodology for opening ourselves up to risk, opening ourselves up to the unknown, and opening ourselves up to people that we didn't know to make stuff with us. So from a project that we developed with the Royal Opera House called The Rules Do Not Apply, we worked really hard to build an open innovation, open call-led methodology for commissioning and developing projects in this space. There is a huge risk of a kind of small world approach to all of this stuff. And I know in the next speech we'll talk about the open metaverse. The open metaverse will only happen if in the kind of points of contact and points of creation we have with it, it's opened up to let everyone in. And so for the Rules Do Not Apply, which brought opera and high art together, about as elite a kind of sense of culture as you possibly have, we made sure we went out neutrally to market, worked very hard with an EDI consultant to develop the right language to make sure we got kind of access to networks that let us speak in a way that didn't put that high art on a pedestal, and made sure that a kind of artist networks across the world could come to us and develop projects. That's kind of transformed the way we are trying to work in National Gallery X and the way we are trying to ask others to work with us. So we built this approach, as I said, for a project with the Royal Opera House. We then refined it for a project with Nesta about sustainability and technology. And in the last 6 months, we started to externalize that, as with Art of London, a public art commissioning project by one of the business improvement districts in London. We've asked them to use the methodology we developed to try and go out into the world in different ways. That's simply put the lesson that NGX is trying to kind of bring now to the world, is that, I said, it's about the how rather than the what and why. We won't get predictions of the future correct. We won't get our kind of selections of technology correct, because all of these things, there's kind of too many parameters for us to think about. But what we can do right is make sure everyone gets a chance to participate in it in the right kind of way. So that for us is kind of now what NGX means. It's a methodology for how we engage artists, technologists, creatives with us. And then another pivot happened. So ongoing sequence of change, this kind of story from the inside as you kind of try and figure this stuff out. So as we were doing this last year, I was asked to become a fellow for the Arts and Humanities Research Council to think about a larger scale project called CoStar. So NGX, kind of beautifully small thing at the heart and the kind of margins of the National Gallery. CoStar, very large £100 million public investment into thinking about what the future looks like. Now, I tried to tell them thinking about what the future looks like is very risky, but they're determined to do it. And so CoStar is kind of, in a simple way, NGX writ large. It's a kind of attempt to shape the strategic future of the creative industries in this country through the kind of prod of public-led investment. That comes from 7 years, really, where government money has been phenomenally important to the develop of a whole series of kind of creative technology practices across the country, beginning with ventures like the Creative Clusters Programme, Audiences of the Future over the last few years, a whole series of projects. Now you're seeing, and now I think actually unboxed the kind of what was the Brexit Festival, as it was initially known, at least by me, is a kind of wave of public money that's asking scientists, creatives, artists, technologists to do new things together with the belief that not only do they create interesting work, because of course that's at the heart of it, but beyond the interesting work, that they create new economies, new productivity, new growth, and new social benefit and impact. If you add up all the money that's been spent by the government in the last 7 years about this, about £500 million in total. It is a very substantial sum of money. And probably only the UK, for all its many faults as a country, would actually think of doing that way round. Because we've seen the importance of creative industries for what the UK economy does, going on towards 10% of the total GDP, one of the few areas of growth in a low productivity, low growth economy, and an area where we are unquestionably good. So CoStar kind of comes to that and says, well, look, what if we build innovation labs for the country at large to bring creativity, research, and technology together? So over the last year, kind of as an extension of the NGX work, it's been trying to kind of build the case for that and build the financial, both the economic and the creative benefit it can bring. And so the first thing I did in that project was to try and kind of pull it further into the future. That project had its roots in a kind of very specific look at the idea of virtual production, a very kind of particular thing happening in the film production sector, derived from the games production industry, that's kind of using methodologies to create, and it was very near at hand, things that will happen in the next 2 to 3 years. Given that government money doesn't happen that fast, you've got a lot of sign-off process to go through with the Treasury, endless sign-off process. And then you have to build something. Trying to focus on changes you can impact in the next couple of years seemed to me like it wasn't really going to work. So we started pushing the idea back to the changes it could make over the next decade. If you build something by 2025, 2026, and it starts to operationalize, really, where's it working? And of course, there, the metaverse word suddenly becomes apparent, because of course, any sense of the future now for where the destination of creativity and technology is going looks towards the metaverse. So CoStar, hopefully, is going to happen. We're into the very last sign-off process with the Treasury, and that will see the building of one very large national R&D lab somewhere around the country, and then the funding of a network of labs from small to big around the UK to help this kind of creativity, research, technology thing to happen at scale. It is something we are extremely good at in this country. NGX is a kind of tiny example of it, but all across the country you're seeing these examples where artists, where creators, where technologists, where advanced research come together and create amazing new things. And that, even if you don't know what the future looks like, that kind of approach seems to me absolutely something that the metaverse can be beneficially shaped by. It's a unique kind of UK superpower skill that we can focus on together at a point where whatever Mark Zuckerberg and his infinite kind of wads of cash want to do kind of can be participant but can't entirely define. And so NGX, so CoStar, as I said, will happen, and it means that as we see this kind of emerging large-scale national infrastructure, as we see what's happening with the big American and Chinese technology companies, we get the chance then to kind of reinvent the things we do in their context. If you know what you're doing at national level because of these investments, kind of what it means, if you know that a company as big as Facebook has put all of its eggs on the metaverse basket, the projects that you then define as a result can reshape themselves around that. So I'm probably going to rebrand NGX as a metaverse studio, because it sounds cool, right? And it means that we've guessed what the future looks like, although too late. We called it an infinite studio to begin with, which was really a kind of way of simply, and there's a whole bunch of stuff we can do, we don't quite know what it is yet. But if it becomes a metaverse studio, it kind of fits a model. And for all of us as we kind of navigate this space, technology and capital go hand in hand. We have to find the available technologies to work with. We have to find the capital to make things happen. Clearly, there is a vast wave of capital investment going into the metaverse. There is a vast wave of public investment going into creative R&D. So that, to me, is a kind of sweet spot for 3 to 5 years to operate in, to enable good things to happen. And if we don't operate there, someone else is going to do that shaping work for us. As with any kind of technology change period, if we, and I think particularly to the artist in the room, if you are not operating in that space, someone else is definitely creating the future for you. I do not like Mark Zuckerberg's version of the future. It is unattractive as much as anything else from an aesthetic point of view, and seemingly quite dull from every other point of view. The artists, the creators, the independence of technologists will create a much more interesting future that questions its moral and ethical issues, creates things that aren't expected. And if we don't have that, we will miss out on a lot. So it's kind of the bullshit and the brilliance of these things coming together is where, as I said, the kind of sweet spot we can operate at. So with NGX in the next year or so, we'll do 2 things as a result of that. On one side, I want to get kind of further away from the market. The more that this stuff marketizes, the less interesting it becomes to me. There's very useful real-world use cases for the National Gallery as a broader entity to use virtual reality. We do it. We just ran a very successful virtual reality headset exhibition about Veronese, to use mixed reality, to use artificial intelligence. But they're kind of near at hand now. So let's kind of push them into an adoption mode where institutions can work with them directly. And so we will build more kind of, for that, to help that, we will use more kind of close to market technologies. But I want to get away from that in the research work we do. So to me, it's kind of not XR and MR and what's AI doing tomorrow. It's more about what happens afterwards. If you know the brilliant kind of economic technology theorist Carlota Perez, she thinks this decade is the end of a cycle, not the beginning of one. That you're coming to the end of 50 years of information technology revolution, of which this is the final bit before something else replaces it. Now that might be quantum and all the things that happen there, but whatever it is, it hasn't happened yet. And so I want to kind of think more about the future beyond the kind of metaverse than I want to think about what kind of it means now. We did our first project on that last summer, starting to think about the implications of brain-computer interfaces, one of those kind of not quite there yet technologies and what it might mean. So Ali Hosseini, our brilliant kind of creative director, did this brilliant project with a whole series of people where they wanted to think about the kind of creative use case for brain-computer interfaces. Now, BCIs barely really exist as real-world technology at this point, so they kind of simulated what that might look like. As you watched this stream taking place, streamed live from NGX, your webcam would, in principle, be reading the pulse that's beating in your head right here. That would, of all the people watching at the same time, that would kind of feed back into an AI, which would speed up the production of a kind of video piece that was happening on these screens. And for the musicians improvising live in front of it, would change the pace at which they were supposed to be improvising at. So it was a little bit chaotic. They were very competent musicians, but as the pace kind of went up and down, they were having to keep up in quite a kind of random way. So it sounded like a very groovy 1970s free jazz happening, which is kind of what it was, but starts to question the use case of what becomes possible. And all of those things to me seem now more important as we think about the next generation of innovation. What does 6G mean rather than 5G mean? We've been developing use cases for 5G for the last 5 or 6 years. What happens with quantum computing and art? There's kind of a next generation of things to come. So that to me is kind of, I said, we're to kind of start to close, that to me is where we end up now. That we know the metaverse is this thing happening here. Have no doubt about it. Billions and billions of, infinite billions of capital, infinite time, kind of moment of opportunity, but you know something's happening beyond it. And that's the role for art at this point, is to think what happens beyond the present and start to shape the long-term future. So people like Afra and Olive, others in the room, you know, you go and decide what tomorrow looks like before the big bad guys of money and technology do. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you, Chris, for a fantastic thought presentation, and we certainly have a lot of questions now before us. I think Chris has really raised some very critical questions, and we'll talk about that later. We're going to have Carl Smith after the break, will have more ideas and questions from us. So I think this is really shaping up to be very exciting, at least from my perspective. Now, I have no sound at all. That's okay. What do I do? Turn it on?
It's on, it's working.
It's working. Okay. So I want to get back to the slideshow. And this is our little end here. I have a little poem for that. Being artificial. This is all part of it. So I actually need my glasses. I could have done it without it. So being artificial can be beneficial, setting me free from reality into virtuality, where imagination rules, fools the senses, no pretenses. The inner space of my mind, human and artificial life combined, my identity defined, undeterred by normality nor practicality. Being who I want to be, the real world of virtuality mirrored in my physical existence, no distance between the two, still love you. Okay, so here you have a picture of the human brain being transferred into a robot. And this was a particular image and concept that Elon Musk thought was wonderful. So this could be part of our future. We might be programmed with be programming robots to mirror ourselves or all kinds of things. But one of the big questions is, what are the drivers of building the metaverse? And how do they balance? Is it going to be driven by technology? Mistake. What are one driver that's really not put in the mix very often is the cultural and social one. We're living in a revolution of culture, of diversity and new voices. So our work has to represent that. And then as Chris pointed out, things have to be driven by artists and vision and not purely by technology, because that, if it is, we're going down a really scary road. So I think this is part of our great challenge. Okay, I look forward to the second half. How long is the break, John? Half hour to have fun. Okay, great. Thank you. We'll see you soon. Oh, I didn't get to my last slide. Oh, come to the very end. No.
Great so far, Jonathan. Yep. Impressive.
I forgot to say, this is my avatar.
Just a quick one. Can I plug in my laptop? Or I'm going to have to. Well, or is it going to mess up?
Well, it will mess up things.
All right, so I'm happy to.
You've got
stick. I can get this.
Yes, okay, that's fine. Yeah,
have you got one?
A stick.
Is that a stick I
No,
can
no,
use?
yes, I do have one.
If you've got one I can use, then let me do that now.
It's probably easier on here. You can get it set up, but it's basically we spent half an hour setting it up.
I can only imagine. That's why I'm asking for a
Because
stick.
it's got all the Zoom running.
Yeah.
You know, the number of things you have to do to make it hybrid is.
Well, it seems like a nicely curated symposium. We've all got very different perspectives.
Well, we could start at 12, yes, rather than.
So, I mean, it's the
I
fear
think so.
with every
Yeah.
approach with
So what time are we in
is
now?
that you
Well,
really
it's
go
20,
to
Yeah, give it 20
20
minutes,
minutes,
20 minutes
it's
is
fine,
fine.
yeah, yeah.
taking away human agency. And but it's the damage it does in the 20 years while that happens, and then you sort it afterwards.
In fact, as we only have 25
How
minutes
many people's
anyway,
lives
so
were
we
ruined
take
in
it out. Or, you know, Mr. Shepherd used to say,
Yeah,
I can help you.
I think it's early enough in the day, the 20
Yes,
minutes is fine.
yes.
Just doing one thing like agriculture or one farm, you've all been able to do everything. And that's what his vision was about. So we are with technology.
But is Decentraland Marx's dream come true?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Do you want the lapel mic or the handheld? Because this was causing a bit of trouble. Yeah, yeah, so,
Be careful though.
yes, I know, there's various noises.
First one
Yeah.
will go out kind of 40 or something. There's only still 2 or 3.
We signed up for innovating these kind of things, and they want so many, they want financial outcomes within 2 years or 1 year, which
So I mean,
is impossible.
it's AHRC rather than Innovate, so it's not just set that same type of. I mean, the first piece is the sort of £50 million large scale lab. So that will be in partnership with the university, TV/film studio, and a few others too.
We're in conversations with somebody who's called Lucy,
Okay.
which is an innovation lab.
Yeah.
Like Blackburn, Coventry,
Yeah.
lots of other things. We're looking to do it and then data centres and based on Lucy. We are looking for AR solutions.
So I mean, the state of art, you build the lab, you fund a series of other kind of nodes of the network, then they run these kind of collaborative, very R&D projects between them.
I mean, is this a network that you're talking about? Or have you got, I mean, I'm just thinking about building lots of cities with lots of campus, engaging whole communities. I think engaging lots of, we work in the medical area, we're working with artist communities and so on. But is there something that we could learn from you or work with you in order to not,
Well, I mean, it's one of the things we haven't got to yet is kind of how you formalise the methodology. So we know where it comes from and we know where it's going. So probably is the answer. So I mean, drop me an email and we'll figure it out. I never carry cards. So
I'm just the old one.
But
yeah.
Awesome.
So would you let me know how to
Yeah. Absolutely.
Hi. So are you still updating?
I'm just,
Probably it's safer if you call me to put it onto here.
yeah, no, let's do a test now.
Yeah.
Just to see before you go. Have we got sound as well?
So,
Have we tested sound?
well,
Otherwise,
you
I've
have
got
to mute.
Bluetooth.
Yeah,
No, I've got a Bluetooth speaker, so I can plug that in. Luckily I thought that.
Yes, but the main thing is echo and all that sort of
Yeah,
thing. So
well,
basically,
let's
it's all
do a little
muted.
test. Should be fine if I keep this away from the.
Right. Well, anyway, up to you. I'm just
Let me do that second.
warning you.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah. Quick test.
Yeah. I'm always grateful to be put on after a break. So
Yeah. Well, literally, this took about half an hour or more to set up. So.
Yeah, I could believe it, especially as you're recording.
Yeah. Well, also, sadly, the Oh,
Thank
nice
you.
to meet you. Yeah,
Thanks for your
good.
kindness,
That's
sir.
okay.
Lovely
Yeah,
to meet you.
yeah. Good luck with your yes, afternoon session.
That is the afternoon, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, I'm ready now to try this.
Right. Okay. So if you want to
Just
just
let me do that.
yeah.
Hey, Leslie.
Hey, man. Have you got like abstracts about all these talks somewhere?
They're in the book.
What's the book?
You
Do I have to buy a book?
You have to buy one. Sorry.
I see.
You can,
Yes.
you can look at.
Can I just look at
You can
yours?
borrow
So I
it,
can
yes.
decide?
Yeah.
Yeah, sweet.
Well, that is all. It's all on. Yes, it is all online as well now. So
It is
you
online?
get that free.
Oh.
Yes. So,
Yeah.
Oh,
so
cool. Well, that's
yes.
good to know.
That's this one, I think. Yeah. I'll put it on here.
Just a cross book.
Yes. It, yeah.
Were you at Breaking Convention?
Yes.
Nice. Your
Okay.
hair. Lots of good hair there. I could never do. My hair's too dark.
I feel pretty
Light as it gets.
So mine, to get to the purple, at least that's an okay start.
I have a Nazi for a hairdresser. I love him, but he won't let me decide anything. He's like,
Yes,
I
but
think
no,
myself.
they more than that. They need to zoom. Right, yes, you're in high
do you want to
grade.
go past it?
You can't just.
This is
Yeah.
getting
So
together.
the
He
first
literally
thing is
says
to
that.
stop.
So I had a friend that used to do these really bleach blonde hair.
You want to show it before I test it?
He was like, no, it looks shit.
Right. You want to
Yeah, I just
But
want
he
to
has
see
the
if
without
hair
zoom
breaking
first.
off.
Okay, fair enough.
That's
In that
cool.
case, we'll,
Yeah.
I have a
okay.
master that.
We'll stop that.
You what?
Fine.
I have no
Okay,
master
yes.
that.
Yes, if
Yeah,
you
that's
just
the
want
beauty
to.
of having
Yeah,
good
that's fine.
hairdressers.
Yes, we're
Yeah, he's very good.
we're in a little.
That's why I let him be a little bitch. It also cracks me up.
Because also I want to check looks like it's the right format.
Are you an artist?
Also a scientist.
You're what?
Also a
Yes.
What kind of
Right,
scientist?
let's try that. So now we just need to
Are you
check.
working in something with your
I think I'm
science?
living in that.
Visual?
I think I'm in a hyper.
Yes, and I can do that. It's like very good info and saves things.
Okay.
Because
Do you have
So is that going to work? Is it?
well, we don't know. He's going to try.
Oh, okay.
Try audio
You're doing
on
cyberdelic.
this
I mean, there is a room.
Okay, cool.
Otherwise, you know, you might want to hold your hand mic up to that speaker if you want the online people to hear it.
Yeah, I
So
hate
that
these.
won't go in. Yeah. So you need an extension lead,
If you can
basically.
get one, that would be useful. So otherwise I'm like, how
Yes.
do I-
Right. Well, I can go and ask for one.
Oh, yes, that's a good thought.
Carl.
So it looks
Little
like,
fires
can you
over.
see it on the screen?
Yes, this little box. It's little dots.
There's a little box, is there? Front.
I think it's all about, like that guy said, it's like, we don't know what it is, but we're investing in it. Seems to be the consensus of everybody involved. All the fashion people I'm talking to are like, yeah, same, that's all we're doing.
Can't plug in. It's too big.
Let me know what you said. Show you.
Who are all these little people floating
They're
around?
all in the metaverse. Yes.
And
And they're listening to you. They can hear.
I'm not convinced by the
Are they
idea, but
listening?
it's early days.
Yes.
Somebody might
But we didn't
need
realize.
power when
So what would be good is to be able to
I just
see
did an AR
how
piece,
it
you can
looks.
see it here, I copy animation.
Is it stick of a switch?
No, it isn't. No. So if you're ready to do that.
Well, I'm ready if once I've tested the audio. Let me
Would you
just-
want to wait and do
Oh,
that
hang on a
first?
minute. Now I
Yes,
need to
okay.
connect Bluetooth.
Yeah. Well, with the audio, as I said, for online, you might be best holding the microphone near that. I mean, basically, there's a room mic that will pick up general room stuff, and then there's that mic that will pick up stuff as well.
I've got quite a lot of audio, so that's the issue.
Yeah,
So
that was the
if
idea.
I
It's
try
quite
the
a cosmic
Bluetooth.
publication.
Yes, but
She works a lot with
you know that'll
magic
work
cosmos,
here, but
so
online,
we
I
need
don't know.
Oh,
We're
I
not going to
see.
hear it.
Well, I can still do that, like you say. So,
Yeah, well,
but if we,
if
do
you
you know
want
your
to hear it online, put
Yeah.
the microphone near it.
No, that's fine. I'll do that. That's absolutely that's sensible. But in terms of the Bluetooth to connect this,
Oh, right.
this is in front,
Yes, no,
rather than
it's probably
behind,
okay, but I'm just
it
saying
should
that's
be
one of
okay.
the things that can.
Yeah, and also I can just put it over here. You know what I mean? But then I need to sort of shuffle over to the
Yeah,
back.
no, I would have it near,
Yeah.
nearer, but yes. But I think the easiest way is to point the mic at you when you want
Yeah,
online people.
Right, let me just check the
But
amount.
there'll be something anyway, because the room might,
Yes.
it's not going to be so.
No, that's true. So what time is it now?
Well, 3 minutes to 12.
3 minutes. Oh.
Do you want me to try and get it?
No, I mean, I'm
I'm just going to talk to the room.
no, absolutely.
She's been trying to connect us, and hopefully we'll meet. We might even meet this evening.
Who are you talking about?
Annabelle and Ariel. Do you know Ariel?
Oh, is that her boyfriend?
No, Ariel is a woman she's staying with that's doing some pretty like cutting edge cyberdelic vibes that you should know, and she's
Oh,
been
yeah?
backed by the NASA of the UK, whatever that body's called.
NASA of the UK.
Yeah, the space agency of the UK. But
There was one.
she really wants to introduce us, and you know Annabelle's like super shit hot at mantra, like she really gets it. Like she gets the spatializations of sounds. If you're going for mudra and mantra, maybe y'all should talk to Annabelle a bit more. So I'm really impressed. Whenever she teaches me a mantra, I can just hear like fine tuning of the sounds, like I can't with other yoga teachers and stuff. You know what I mean? I need to really hear it move around and do what it's supposed to do. Yeah, so the consistency of spatial, and I'm really interested in that quality of sound, like sound and space. How can you represent that?
All set up.
Oh, great.
Yeah. All nice and smooth.
Let's talk about that. That's
Change.
my sort of. It's also Leslie, other Leslie, I'm Leslie too, but other Leslie's a sonic artist. So her gestural stuff is kind of more about, I think, learning the sound. I've been chatting with another kid who's got some early development. I think it's, and also Ariel's the ones that you can see kind of. So as a performer, it's kind of cool to like enter into that space and kind of be like a studio experience. You can make work and you can do things with an instrument, you know? How does your body move? And then so much of singing is so manipulated. It's really psychedelic. People have seen it. It's really great.
So are you ready to try sharing the screen?
Yeah, I'm still waiting for it to.
Screen's going anyway.
It's going, but
Well, it's plugged in.
it's more if I need one.
Yes, for the discussion.
Yeah, at the end.
Is the camera all right?
Yeah. Yes, one thing is we're going to have this discussion session. What it'd be good to not, well, probably not, because he's going to give a talk, and then it'd be good to come out. So in about, I don't know, 30 to 40 minutes, if you could be around when we do the
Okay,
changeover.
but do you want to zoom out the camera?
Yes, in 30 minutes, not now.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
So I mean, I can probably come and find you.
Yeah, I'm going to be in the office.
Yes,
anyway.
okay.
Someone gonna sit on?
Yes, we're going to sit there. So ideally, we're going to be sitting here, so we'd like the camera looking at this.
Yeah,
this
that's fine.
area.
Completely fine. Yeah.
But just warning you now. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
Great.
right.
But we'll, first of all, we would just want to talk in a normal way. So,
Yeah.
Great. Let's just try sharing this. Do you think this is going to cause any issues with feedback? We'll find out anyway.
Yeah, we'll find out. I hope not.
I think it'll be alright.
Well, It says that, yes.
That's why that's
Right.
slow.
Yeah. So I guess we're ready to roll there. I can bring people in if you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's do it.
Okay.
Just seeing if the videos play on their own.
Why not take this to the clinicians to study what they're doing, but why not also bring it to the.
That one.
And there is this kind of weird place for processing and pushing science and things are.
I think you could actually have quite similar, you could really work on both sides of the line.
Licensing and art
Oh, for
because
that.
it's not the job to do that. You know, so that's the no-no on creation. You're not prescribing, you're leaving it open end. And I think that's what
Recording.
it challenges them to do, you know, that people take them as an critic and that's more about trying to express culture and feeling like it's mentally being that. And I do think there's something about the psychedelic marijuana doesn't feed into that, but it's definitely adding to more intelligent creation than what I'm seeing in the.
I think Graham and Terry are shepherding people. So.
Okay, good.
We've lost the slides, just so you know.
Lost the slides?
Yes.
Yeah, it's just because I've stopped sharing because I'm just fixing this out.
How does that become a big box?
You mean I don't know. Depends what version of Zoom you're running or something probably. You can add an icon
Oh, yeah,
on your
yeah.
own Zoom, so it's coming from them. They've got the little Zoom software, I've got the big Zoom.
So I think we just need to start sharing again. So I've turned off the sharing, that's why it's.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Do you want me to do it?
You want to just turn the sharing because I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah, well, exactly.
So that's already set to go, and now you're doing share.
Well, no.
You can turn that off.
Yes.
It's good. Yes.
The Wi-Fi
Whether we
doesn't
will
seem
get
to be
another
working
wave
at all.
and
Is
it
there like
will
another?
You have the new password?
Yeah, it just doesn't seem to be logging on. I don't know. Are you?
Yeah.
I can. If you need to go in there, don't worry. Go and do that.
We're at the
Great.
first
Is
slide.
that the other microphone? Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
You want? Let me just turn on the.
Yeah, he's going to use a hand mic. She's going to use that for the discussion. Or does it need you?
Oh, I'm just going to turn it
Not
on.
now, though.
No, in about 30 minutes.
Oh,
So, yeah.
Let me just turn it on.
Yes, so basically, yes, if you can be ready to zoom out on the
Recording.
camera in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Right, you're
Yeah,
welcome.
yeah. Hi there. Yeah. So, no, well, fine, but you were saying you wanted to do odd things.
Recording.
Yeah, but he's taken the whole break to get him set up with his odd thing. So, yeah. Right, okay. So we can try. Otherwise, I suggest having a demo if it doesn't work in hybrid mode.
Okay, well, yeah.
It's up to you. It's your 20 minutes.
Yeah, I think because I'm just after lunch, so hopefully there's some
Well, if you're
during
immediately
lunch
after,
maybe to try.
yes, you can. Yes, that's a good time to be.
Let's just try to catch up and see whether it works.
Yeah.
We're good to go?
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Speaking to you from the Metaverse, in the Metaverse, about the Metaverse. Okay, so we've got a bit of an echo.
Can you turn the speaker up and down?
I can do that, yeah.
Maybe turn it off when you're.
I think just turning it down is fine. All right, so third part of the symposium today. The title of my talk, World as Interface, Exploring the Ethical Challenges of the Emerging Universe, a Metaverse. I'm a full-time academic based at Ravensbourne, which is directly opposite the O2, and now we have the Design District. This is my new office here, which is this building here. Exciting new lab down there as well. So this is the paper that this symposium's based on. It's open, Science Open, so you can look at that. It's also in your handbooks. So specifically, this symposium's about exploring the relationship between digital art and identity with respect to AI, machine learning, and the developing ideas of this metaverse that we're all hearing about. So I'm going to focus this specific short talk around the ethical challenges of two projects I'm working on. Volumetric as a service, which is when we have these volumetric studios, which means that we're able to now move from a 2D world, which is where we take photographs, to a 3D world of point clouds. And even your phones now can generate point clouds because LiDAR scanners are on the back of a lot of iPhones, etc. I'm also going to talk about the X Prize, which is a big project that I've just finished. We got to be semi-finalists in this huge X Prize competition in America. And the project there was around this idea of neuroadaptive mixed reality training. So as I mentioned, these volumetric capture studios are springing up. They're needed for the metaverse to exist. If you don't have these volumetric capture studios, you don't have a metaverse, because the metaverse is based on 3D data from point clouds of all sorts of different contexts. I'm going to argue that entertainment may not be the appropriate use of the metaverse, because we're all going to be starving and electricity will be so expensive that we won't be spending time in VR so much as trying to survive. So maybe we need to be thinking about the blockchain as a mechanism for that, and the metaverse as a mechanism for that. So at the moment, obviously we've seen the virtual production techniques have massively gone up during the pandemic. The need to have this alternate world, because the real world may not be available for producing anything in. But clearly we need frameworks, ethical frameworks about how we protect our data. If you think about Facebook in 2D knows you better than your mum knows you. Facebook in 3D through the Oculus Quest will know you better than you know yourself and be able to predict what you're going to do next. So very, very difficult problems that we're facing. So we built a holoportal studio at Ravensbourne with the help of Double Me initially. And this is basically a big 3D scanner that enables you to create point clouds, moving point clouds. And it's a context engineering machine, because basically you shoot the same content once and then you can put that content into multiple contexts, whether it's animation, film, or VR, or mixed reality, as in this particular instance. So this is me actually shooting these guys onto the scene. So it's a mixed reality. So you're seeing these footballers that have been scanned in our holoportal studio now in the HoloLens being placed into context and filmed. So you're kind of the director and the cameraman at the same time. So initially when we started with this technology 6-7 years ago, we thought, oh, this would be interesting. It'd be like an Airbnb of bodies, where you're able to have lecturers beaming all over the place. Problem is that a lot of people are very skeptical, very cautious about having their bodies volumetrically scanned, because if you think about voodoo's all about putting pins in dolls. Now we'll have you as a 3D avatar, which you can print out anywhere and put you into any sort of context that you don't really want to be in, but you wouldn't know about it. So talking about these ideas, mobile phones, this is a sensor scanner that will go onto the back of an iPad. So this will capture a 3D point cloud of a still image, not a moving image. Also, if you look on the back of your iPhone, you might see this third sensor, which is a LiDAR. LiDAR scanning is how now we can do it with a phone. So I can actually, if I see somebody's outfit that I really like, I can actually scan their outfit, then put that into a 3D package, adjust it to my size, and have that outfit 3D printed. So we're seeing that these point cloud capabilities are available already. So this world is already happening. The future is not distributed. It's not evenly distributed, but it is happening in certain parts of the world. There's a really good app for LiDAR scanning called Canvas on an iPhone, which will basically allow you to capture any room and then immediately put that into VR. So we know when Google Glass was released, it was immediately banned because it was an unacceptable invasion of privacy when you're being followed around the supermarket. But now imagine there's all these glasses, Apple glasses being released, which is going to be the beginning of mixed reality, as it was the beginning of mobile learning and mobile, smartphones when the iPhone was released. So a lot of this technology is based on parallel tracking and mapping, which basically is a computer vision algorithm created at the University of Oxford, which enables you to, with a phone, scan an environment and all the edges of that environment are known. So through computer vision, we can see in 3D, which means we don't take photos anymore, but we will be taking 3D models. So everything will be a 3D model. And what does that mean? What does it mean when we suddenly no longer see ourselves in the flat, but we will be seeing ourselves in the round? And when you go to a wedding, it's only when you come back from a wedding that you see how fat you are, because normally you're just flat in a flat image, and you're living in a virtual reality of your own. You're living in a bubble, and ignorance is bliss a lot of the time, but it won't be around for long. So this is a bit of a dystopian nightmare from my friend Kichi Matsuda, hyperreality, and this is kind of what we're expecting, this mixed reality, endless, capabilities for horror. But what does it mean when we're building on top of the base reality? We're building language. Well, we've built language, and we're still building it. But on top of language, now we're going to have this mixed reality. So we're going to be further and further distance, as Zizek says, from the real world. And at a time of what he calls the four horsemen of the apocalypse, having already been dispatched, we've had COVID, we've now got the war, now we've got pestilence coming because of the food supply chains breaking down. Then obviously death follows all of that. So, not the best of times to be launching some of these applications. So think carefully about whether your Metaverse application is really necessary in that world. So I've done a lot of work in Japan. I lived in Japan thanks to Winston Churchill Fellowship, and I worked at Tokyo universities and Keio universities, exploring what I call context engineering, which is this new world where we move from content engineering to this economy of context engineering, where we become, we change our senses, we change our perception as the new content, and that changes all the content ad infinitum before. This is a great example because these are glasses you wear, and it increases the size of your food as you're eating it. So it tricks the brain into thinking that you've eaten more than you have if you're really fat, or if you're really thin, then you need to make the food even smaller. But yeah, this is the kind of things that you can do with mixed reality that has social impact, and I think that this is, good stuff. You've also got things like Snapchat glasses, so it's becoming very, very affordable to be in mixed reality and to curate your world. Not if you don't like men, you can delete them. There'll still be a sign that said there was a man here, or it was something you didn't want anymore. But that we're going to have these curated worlds where we control our existence, we control what we see. So you think about television at the moment, it's already, there's millions of channels. When I grew up, there's 4, and then we had a common base reality that we could discuss. Now everyone's going to be in their own reality tunnels. It's going to be very difficult to have a common census reality. So teleexistence, another project in Japan, was this idea that you put on a pair of gloves and this headset, and then you look down at your body, and then your body's a robot. You've become a robot. This is me in the lab. You're sitting next to yourself, and you're having this out-of-body experience just very, very rapidly, and you think, my God. And Professor Inami, who I work with, immediately having had this experience, decided to give up his role, give up his entire career, and go into virtual reality because he figured this stuff is going to be the next reality-creating scenario. So what happens to identity as we move from 2D photography to these 3D point clouds? A significant aspect of the metaverse, a foundational aspect, is this idea of digital representation, or an avatar of yourself. And what happens to identity once you've got this other, this double consciousness, if you like? So, this digital twinning isn't Second Life, isn't a lot of what we see in the current version of the metaverse portrayed by people like Zuckerberg. A digital twinning, where we create a digital copy of something, is dependent on a regular update. It's not just done once. It has to be a connecting of sensors so that your avatar is constantly updated as you age as well. So it's not just a fixed, prescribed world. So when you put on a mixed reality headset like that Microsoft HoloLens, you're actually creating 3D models of everything you see. So other people, everything you own is then pumped down the servers to Microsoft, and they know everything what's in your house, for instance. So it's incredibly problematic. People aren't thinking about the implications. In terms of what I've mentioned about body avatars, it's like it's very important to mint yourself before somebody mints you, because that's what's coming, right? So we have to have encrypted NFTs of our own body image before somebody else does. This is one of the services we're offering with our new projects. So then you would be the rightful owner of your own digital self. And then it's this idea of, as I mentioned, protect yourself against deepfake productions. So let's see some examples. Sandbox, who's heard of Sandbox? So Sandbox is a metaverse. It's one of the most popular ones. One of my friends bought land, two plots of land for $20 each, and they're currently worth about £20,000. And they're just these little blocks. I mean, it's a little bit pixelated, a little bit like Minecraft, but you can build worlds inside the Sandbox. And lots of companies have bought land and are building their own versions of their commercial properties. But this is what it looks like. It's, a little bit retarded, in my opinion, but this is one option. And then you've got things like Ready Player Me. Ready Player Me is definitely much more interesting, I'd say. You can see much more in terms of, animation, real sort of, there's a reality to it that isn't there in Sandbox. And what's super interesting is that, people are making fashion for their avatars. They're spending more money on their avatars than on themselves in reality. Gucci bags cost more, and there's fashion being made in these worlds that will never be printed in the real world. It will only ever exist in the virtual world. So, again, think about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Is this stuff going to survive when we're all starving and haven't got any electricity? So it's a core metaverse tool. Every fashion label in the world is creating avatars via Ready Player Me. And then, once you've got your avatar, it's like linked to your camera on your laptop. And then it's kind of unnerving because then you've got this avatar that's synced to your mouth and your eyes, and it's like you can give lectures, but then all the people watching your lecture are just not listening to anything you're saying because they're obsessed and amazed by this avatar that you've suddenly become. So it's a kind of cognitive dissonance there. And Samsung are already interviewing their latest cohorts of people in virtual reality. Think about why that is because of the pandemic. But now imagine a future where avatars are interviewing avatars. And again, it's very meta. So I just did a big talk at Masters and Robots, which is a big business conference in Poland. And what we decided to do, this is in our new holoportal at Ravensbourne in the new Institute building. And this was kind of the first week we put it together. And we decided we would talk about the metaverse, or I was rather interviewed by Catherine here about the metaverse from within the metaverse. So let me just give you a little clip on that.
Savvy creatives and businesses are using the metaverse for things that you can't do in real life. Whether that's give you a perspective of the world you can't get, like Marshmallow Laser Feast in the tree, or whether that's hosting events for hundreds of thousands of people that you wouldn't literally be able to do, especially in the lockdown. And the other thing that I was really interested in is you mentioned the sort of buzzword of the moment, NFTs. Yeah. Because as well as having its own currency and, it's going to have a huge economy, the metaverse, it has NFTs, which, we think of as art pieces that, have a value, a digital value in the digital world. So who's exploring this, do you think?
Well, there's currently, I would point to a couple of NFT projects, one being CryptoPunks, which a few people know about. I mean, it's
a great name.
Great name. But yeah, I think the one that I'm most interested in is the Damien Hirst project, The Currency. And what Damien's done is actually take 10,000 original artworks and turn them into NFTs. So if you were lucky enough to get one, you basically have to now choose whether you want the original Damien Hirst piece of physical art or whether you choose the NFT. And everyone initially, including Damien himself, was like, no, I'm going to go full physical.
Yeah.
And it's now, everyone's sort of, because not many people get their heads around, why would I, as an art collector, want to own a JPEG, which everyone else can download,
Yeah.
but I own the original reference to that JPEG. So all you really own is just the pointer.
The pointer, yeah.
So if the artwork disappears from the server, you own a pointer to nothing.
Yeah.
So not many people are getting their heads around it. And I don't think maybe that's the best way of using an NFT. But if you're actually now seeing what Damien's doing, it's a very clever move. It's not new because Marcel Duchamp did something similar in the 30s. So yeah, so you're sort of seeing some of these metaverse, some of the particle effects that you can do once everything becomes a point cloud. So thanks to JB for filming us on that particular day. So another little video. So what happens to dating apps when you're not like able to lie? When you can't have just a photo of yourself. You have to submit a 3D scan. So imagine the quantified self of that. Let's put this on.
Until now. Now, with the aid of SciFi, we can visually see the changes that are happening in every inch of your body.
So with SciFi, we can tell people, I want to see you down an inch throughout your abdominals, or I want to see you up a half inch in your bicep. That's something that's measurable, and we can set very specific goals. I think SciFi could really revolutionize the fitness industry.
So yeah, you're sort of seeing this again, quite dystopian reality where your digital body scan will be required for you to access any dating service, digital signatures to prove that it's a recent scan. And as Vinay says, probably not a good trend, especially for people suffering with body dysmorphia, which is most of us. So just to finish then with one of the case studies. So this was the big X Prize project. So this culminates in lots of my European research from Horizon 2020 with the WeKit project right through to, basically taking voice as a way of measuring affective state. So with voice now, you can actually tell, we can tell if you've got diabetes just through voice. So that's based on an algorithm that's been fed 30 years of medical data from a medical doctor who's recorded all of his patients and then put all of that data into a massive algorithm. And now he can tell ailments from these voice signatures. So if you combine that with what we know about VR, with 5 minutes of VR data, we can tell in the future if you're going to have Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, just from how you're moving, your gait. So this is quite astonishing and incredibly problematic for life insurance or just anything in particular when it comes to, we can do gene testing. In fact, one of my friends bought her boyfriend for Valentine's actually a genetic test to see how he's doing, how he's likely to carry on. And unfortunately for him, his data, her data was great. Her data came back really, she's going to live a long time and not have any problems. His was no good. By 50, he's going to have issues. He was thinking not very long to go. And she dumped him immediately dumped him. So we know that this stuff is really problematic. So with X Prize, what we did was the reason we got into X Prize is because we said we're going to encrypt everything post-quantum end to end, including the voice data, but also the VR data. So to cut a long story short, we created this shared consent framework for how we actually, ensure your data is not even human readable in terms of this post-quantum data. So, it's a long story, but this shared consent framework allows us to have digital capture and generation, packaging, categorization of that data, and then servicing and exploitation. So the framework polices and authorizes data permissions, access, and utilization. Zizek I've already mentioned, brilliant talk he just gave at Let the Light In, which is all about this idea that, the metaverse, and it was a real world-shifting kind of time for me because I was like, okay, a lot of my projects are kind of like not now prioritized because of what's coming down the pipe. And in terms of my TEDx talk at Oxford, which I did last February, Huxley, as he's mentioned, 60 years ago, technology is made for men and not men for technology. But unfortunately, the development of recent social and scientific history has created a world in which man seems to be made for technology rather than the other way around. We have to start thinking about the problem very seriously to see how we can re-establish control over our own inventions. And this was 60 years ago. So to summarize, Huxley's Brave New World seems more applicable and relevant now than ever before. And if you think about it, in the West, we have Brave New World. And in the East, we have Orwell's 1984, rule through fear. In the West, we're ruled through distraction. You know, everyone's drugged to death. You know, surveillance is coming. If you think about it, in the UK, we've now lost the right to protest, which means we are in a fascist state, no longer a democracy. And people are just not even bothered to even, you know, not many people are even aware of it, let alone fighting it. So I'm very concerned about where we're at. But today, technology is making it possible to enslave us en masse while we perceive ourselves to be free. And I think that's where the apathy comes from. We think we have our access to all our digital tools, and unfortunately, that means we're not in the real world. You know, and the real world's coming at you very quickly. So be mindful that you are living in a virtual reality many times over. So we're now suffering such a poverty of vision in every sense, as we are endlessly distracted by technologies that effectively turn off our depth of perception, pattern recognition, and our long-form critical thinking. As I mentioned, once Apple releases their glass, Apple Glass device, the impact on our behavior will be as dramatic as the original iPhone when it was released. And what it actually means is that your iPhone goes into your eyes. You know, we now work through gesture and voice rather than keyboards and screens, which in some ways is great because it means we're back in the world. But unfortunately, as I've tried to highlight here, there's lots of ethical issues that we need to address. So simply through the act of looking, we will be making new realities with our eyes, because as I mentioned, we'll be making another version of reality through this 3D modeling of everything. The Metaverse promises to be one of the biggest employers of the future. Just about to publish this paper for this amazing conference called HICS in Hawaii. That will be next year. So what we need to do is ensure that we don't make the same mistakes that we did when we built the 2D internet. As I mentioned, Facebook's a great example. Facebook's plummeting since it announced its rebrand to Meta. Absolutely plummeting in value, and everyone hates Facebook for a reason. You know, Zuckerberg, take note. You know, people aren't going to take your metaverse for the base layer. How can an open metaverse counteract such an effort? And I think an open metaverse where you know, we can't predict the future, but we can invent it. And I think that's a really important point. And what does it mean for businesses? If it is this next big employer, what does it mean for our relationships, our identities, and the human condition as a whole? Further research should seek to answer these questions, to protect our ethical rights of privacy, integrity, and autonomy, while still fostering user agency through experiences that are empowering, educational, and entertaining. Thank you so much.
That was fantastic and really focused on a critical issue of identity and who's in control, and we'll be sucked into the universe and lose track of our critical identity. But what we have now, do we have any? Is a very, we're setting up now. I don't know if this is on. And we're going to have a discussion with the panelists and see how things come together across these 4 presentations, looking at different questions and having questions from you, comments. So it's a combination of both things. I think really a lot of critical questions have been raised, so I'm sure your mind is full of all kinds of things that we'll have a chance to share. Okay.
Chris, you want to come up and Carl?
I guess I'll appear.
we can share.
Thank you. Okay, so I think I'll just start off with the question to get things going. And I think the thing that comes uppermost in my mind is this question that really is in the title of this symposium, and that's art, digital artists, and identity, ourselves, and how we fit into this broader scheme of the metaverse and some of the implications across these different talks. So why don't we start with you, Chris? You're right here.
You can pass the mic to me first. I was just thinking something as Carl's talk was going on, which is that there's an interesting kind of underlying theme of this. Is that we place artists now as those who can help us avoid some of the worst kind of reality de-engineering of the metaverse. I was rereading book 7 of Plato's Republic the other week, as you do. And of course, for Plato, it wasn't technology that was doing this kind of de-engineering of reality and stopping us being able to see the truth. Actually, 2,500 years ago, it was art that he saw as the problem in that creation. So there is a kind of irony that we now place artists as the one who are going to help us kind of find the human truth underneath this, which probably someone like Plato quite wouldn't have seen. So, you know, look, artists may not solve the problem for us, but at least they're a group of people who are kind of outside the matrix one way or another, who can kind of take on the task. And again, it might not be the creation of art, it might be the creation of kind of social movements or something else, but you know, someone's got to fight the kind of the seeming inevitable of this. I mean, it's the other thing I thought listening to Carl was that, you know, I remember those kind of awful books. What's his name? Something Kelly? One of those kind of Wired kind of guys who talks about these things everything is inevitable, like it's going to happen, and it only happens if we let it, right? So somebody's got to help us fight it back. So, and if that's artists for now, great. They might not be the right people, but at least there's somebody.
So yeah, thanks for that. I totally agree. And if we look at, you know, this idea of who's living in the matrix and who's living outside of the matrix, I think if we look at the indigenous tribes, you know, they kind of want to be where we're at, not realizing it's a false flag and it's not necessarily the right way to go. You know, if we look at the hikikomori of Japan, I mean, a lot of people have already logged out of society 10, 15 years ago. And I mean, to explain the hikikomori, you know, that's 500,000 Japanese, mostly young men, who have just decided reality's too hard. It's just too hard. I'm not taking part. I'm going to stay online gaming, and, you know, have pizza, have everything delivered. Normally they're still with their parents, and that's how it works. But you know, these people don't live very long. And I think when I mentioned the Currency Project, which is Damien Hirst's you know, attempt to print money basically as art, you know, he's struggling now because he's got 10,000 original artworks that were all spot paintings, mostly made by his assistants. But those paintings, you know, you either keep your NFT of that painting or you keep the original artwork. And out of the 10,000, 8,500 are still NFTs with about 3 weeks to go. And he's going to burn all that original art on the 27th of July if people don't redeem their original. And it's kind of like the outcomes of that project will sort of dictate for me, like, who's winning. Is it the Matrix or is it the reality? And I think a lot of people are fighting against the Matrix now because it's the mass exodus from Facebook. We're seeing, you know, people really want to be in, you know, in the physical world again. But of course, you've got the people like my girlfriend who loved the pandemic and loved being inside and is a natural hermit and doesn't really want to come back out. And I'm like in a battle, you know, like, how do I get her out of the house? So it's a really tough one, and I think I'm probably not answering your question, but I'm just trying to point out that there is a battle between in real life and the virtual.
Well, thanks. Well, which one worked? This one better. Okay. Well, I found this fascinating, the difference between the 3 talks. I think it's been very good to see that, and I think this is a great venue for discussing art, science. You know, we've got artists here. I'm a computer scientist, but I like art. We've got artists here who like science, and I think it's great that we can combine the two. I think it's great to hear from Chris that, you know, we're actually leading the world, I think, in terms of connecting those two at the moment. I get that feeling too. And it's great that the government is actually supporting it, which is unusual. So I think you know, in a sense, we're in a good place there for developing things. I hope it continues. I hope people like Chris can keep the government on side. Hopefully, somewhere like the National Gallery has got a bit of clout with the government, perhaps. But we hope so. But at least they seem to be taking a bit of notice. So I think maybe that contrasts with US, because perhaps Tula can say how it compares in the US with what's happening with artists and science.
I'll just come back to my analogy with Dante's Divine Comedy and this heaven or hell concept. Is that in many ways, oh, okay.
Hold it closer.
Hold this one. Okay, that's right. Yeah, in many ways, what's coming down the pike, and it's actually on us right now, we don't have choices in many things, and Carl pointed this out, because we as human beings are being digitized. At first it was the digital age, it was communication, it was emails and photographs, and we were in control. But now, just moving from space to space, anything you do almost is being recorded. And the technology gets better and better. So, and I think that this was really something important that Carl brought out, is that you're actually creating a digital self. But do you have a choice? Can you opt out? It seems to me there'll be less and less opportunity to opt out unless you have someone, even if you're in your house, you're still using your computer. And so it presents, I think, the human identity to a real challenge. In the US, I would say, compared to the UK, we're much more in Disneyland already. And that's a real threat. And more people are living in a kind of what I call the Disney reality. Look at Zuckerberg's avatar. It has that look. So we're facing, there's a lot of excitement about the possibilities. That's when, as we move to heaven. But on the other hand, there's a lot of really deep challenges. So I'm going to turn this back to Chris, and maybe you want to each person to have a little interplay with the audience, have some questions, and then you can answer those specific questions.
Do you want me to ask the audience a question?
Yeah, your question.
That's an outcome I had not prepared for. I mean, what do you guys think? Keep it general.
I kind of have a question, which I guess is mainly aimed at Carl, but it's also like has a thought with it, which is so on that point of like this illusion of choice, like where like how much control really would we have over the curation of that reality that you like pose? Because I can very much see like you would stream towards some uh, some corporate beasts like concept of like a scope of their reality. So if whichever brand of like headset is whether you're with Apple, with Facebook, whatever deals they have will probably influence the types of content and types of like advertising products that you see and be promoted to you. So like how much control would we really have over our curation? And then also within that context, is there even that much value in control over your curation?
Yeah, great question. I think the key thing is that, yeah, if you're going to wear an Oculus, then you're not going to have access. You're not going to have control of what goes on with that data. I mean, when it comes to headsets, you've got a big point there, because most of the headsets you're not going to build yourself. But the reason why we fell down with the X Prize and I didn't get to the finals, because we had to partner with Facebook to be able to use headsets, because we had to train 5,000 people, and the only way you can get 5,000 headsets is to work with Meta at the moment in America. It's an American project. But we couldn't, in fact, X Prize basically blocked us because you know, for Zuckerberg's mud now. He's basically, his reputation is trashed for good reason. And I think the key thing is that they wouldn't budge, even though they could move to a new model, which would be like education over advertising, be a low-hanging fruit for them. They decide, no, we're going to stick to what we do, you know. And I think that is the problem when you've got, you know, everything based on advertising, and you're worth about £10 a year or $10 a year to Facebook, and that's it. But that's, you know, that's a lot when you've got 1 billion users or whatever. So, you know, I hope that's sort of getting to your question. But I think that in terms of whether people care or not, and whether it's just pure apathy all the way down, I think, yeah, most people just want convenience. You know, it's a one-button solution for everything. And I loved what you were saying about Disneyland, because, you know, Disneyland only exists to pretend that the rest of reality, the rest of America's real. You know, and now I don't know if you know the latest development. You can now move into Disneyland. They've got a whole thing where you can literally go buy your life in Disney. But you know, it's scary that how many people want to live a Disney reality.
So is America a metaverse for Disney, or is it the other way around? Anyway, let's open it up to, yeah.
I would just say in general, from being a techno-optimist, I've slowly become a techno-pessimist, but I still think we need to stay involved. I don't think we artists can necessarily change or shape the commercial world, because commercial interest is just too overpowering, but hopefully we can offer an alternative that enough people can see, and that maybe can prevent some of the worst misuses, because every media we've invented in the last, let's say, 200 years has been a more powerful amplifier, not just of good messages, but also of bad. And, you know, 5% of bad behavior, be it, you know, all kinds of online misuse that cannot be regulated. And even if we could regulate the use of media, let's say of Meta, of who owns your identity, who do we trust to store that? Who do we trust say, okay, you're going to be the right country to oversee that? Are the other countries going to abide? Am I going to accept whatever that country or that organization is going to do? I think it's completely uncontrollable. But I would love to hear otherwise.
Tula, we've got a little technical problem that people who are online can't hear the audience and can't hear what we're...
Well, we could hand round a microphone.
Grab a microphone and we live and learn. This is the point of being hybrid.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, I'm done, or should I repeat that?
Well,
just a little bit.
I'm not sure I can. Okay, I started with saying that I've become a techno-pessimist from originally being a techno-optimist, because we humans have managed to misuse every media or amplification of media in the last 200 years. Not the majority, but enough people to make the use of media and control of the media and control of the content of the media a problem. Be it commercial use, or be it personal misuse, or be it online mobbing. So who would we trust controlling the control of a metaverse or data from the metaverse? Do you want names? I'm Mechtel Schmidt, New York University.
I have a more optimistic view.
I'm happy to hear that.
I think when you first spoke, you said we can never influence the commercial interest or the commercial focus of attention. I mean, I think what you're getting at there is the person whose name that's been mentioned quite often already. It begins with Z. When he first announced Meta, I don't think I was there at the point of announcement, but I did listen to his 1 hour, 20-minute exposition of what he thought Meta might be and how Facebook would become Meta. Now, it was interesting enough, but as Chris has already said, it was deadly dull. And the whole point of this future that we're aiming for is that it is fantastical beyond belief. It is the greatest opportunity that the earth has ever offered to artists, the greatest by far. And I'm saying that because I really mean that. So when you stated at the outset, well, the artists will always be at the beck and call of commercial interest, it is not true. I think, in fact, we are now at the point of going back a few centuries. We're in the time of Leonardo and Michelangelo. Vito would love to know this, that his city of Florence is going to be recreated on a worldwide map. We have Zuckerberg, who actually is the equivalent of Cosimo Medici. We want to make him the equivalent. He isn't quite at the moment. I've got this belief that he could be. But not if we sit here moaning about it, saying we can't influence him. I think everything we've said here is absolutely brilliant. I think Carl's description of the bodies we have to assume to enter the metaverse is absolutely spot on. And I haven't heard anybody before really define what that means. I think Chris's exposition of the future that he started to create at NGX, and I can see from what he says, it's becoming genuinely much bigger. And he doesn't want, he wants a totally open metaverse, and Mr. Z wants actually a totally closed metaverse. There's a big opposition there. But we have to convince Mr. Z that the open metaverse is the way to commercial success. Now, he's open to conviction, I'm absolutely certain. I can't say that I can do it. I don't know how to do it. I did invite him to tomorrow's discussion, but he's not coming. One day he might. I did invite David Chalmers, who is the person who wrote Reality Plus, to tomorrow's meeting. He replied instantly from New York and said he would certainly be here, except that he's talking on the same subject in Paris. Now, the only reason I'm saying that is we have to not have a little isolated workshop here. EVA is a worldwide organization. And I think that when Jim initiated in 1990 the idea of EVA, he somehow had in mind what is now beginning to transpire, that the digital universe is becoming as significant as the physical universe. I think he knew that, even in 1990. And his vision is something that we can now begin to make a virtual reality. I think that's all I've got to say. I've said enough.
I mean, just one thought listening to you speak, and I mean, there's thinking about the kind of the creative and radical opportunity for artists to create more radical versions of the future. I mean, in a way, the thing we need to do is to create a more radical version of the future than the one created by the Matrix film in 1997. I think the great film critic David Thompson talks about The Matrix, which is a film he really hates. And what he says about the trouble with it is, it's a kind of this dystopian version of the digital world created from within the system. So it's not a kind of outsiders, it's not Henri Rousseau completely outside the system, kind of just thinking of it, this is a $200 million movie that did $1 billion at the box office. It's totally from within the system, and it's reshaped unquestionably our imagination of what things like the metaverse can be. And I think there's an absolutely opportunity there that you talk about. There is a moment now where artists, social radicals, genuine outsiders to the system, and genuine new voices, just as Leonardo and co were. These were not, we know these people at the National Gallery. These were not easy insider voices. They were very good at getting money from the inside, but they were weirdos from the outside. They created a radical, they created humanism radically from the outside and pushed it to the inside. That if the metaverse is as important as we think it is and transformative, like this is the moment for those kind of radical outside voices to step in and do things that are much more interesting than the Matrix film was. As much as the aesthetic of the Matrix lives with us and the idea is like it's a stupid dumb film at its heart, and a lot of it is there are better ideas of the future that we can create from it. So being techno-optimist or pessimist is one thing, but like seeing technology as neutral and then creating new futures against it seems to me really the task underneath this.
I think, and something you said, Terry, I think the critical thing is now that the technology allows for this massive participation. It's not you were talking about this, exclusivity. And what Zuckerberg is doing would fail if it didn't have millions, if not billions, of people participating on some level. So that changes the dynamics of the totality. That it doesn't work as an isolated thing. So it's under the influence, social, cultural, and technology that allows for us to humans to do things they couldn't do before. But it's participation and engagement that are really immersive. Those types of things at a really critical aspect. And I think it's a huge challenge for traditional institutions as museums, because they're stuck in what they do. They feel confident. They don't want to change. But this is a moment of extreme change. And I think digital artists will have a much greater role to play within these institutions. And if you see, even now, you go to an exhibit, you have to really search out, is there any digital? There probably isn't. I've done a lot of, even in the latest exhibits. So this is where the legacy systems are going to be challenged. And the new values are the human values. So.
Yeah, just to quickly add, I think Chris is right. I think that the media, the films that we're subjected to, that we choose to watch, they create our future. They seem to be foretelling us what's coming, and most of it's very dystopian, very depressing. And I think that's where the artist comes in, is to reshape that narrative. So let's question who is writing that narrative, for what purpose, for what to keep us all in fear. I mean, I've probably done a good job of putting more fear into the system this morning, but I speak from a perspective of concern and one of like, let's change the narrative and let's not be apathetic, because what's coming is this immersive media where we're not just passively watching films, we are in the films that we're watching. So it becomes very critical, all of this stuff.
I mean, one thing I'll just add is that, in a sense, we've seen a similar situation, because Tim Berners-Lee invented the web, and Microsoft thought, we can do it all, and forget about, this Tim Berners-Lee upstart. And eventually, have a browser, browse the web and so on. I think perhaps we're at that stage with the metaverse. I'm hoping the open metaverse will win over Mr. Z, but we don't know at the moment. Will Mr. Z win, or will something more open win? We'll find. We're in well, I think it'll be one, it will go one way or the other.
I would like to differentiate from my techno-pessimism, rather call it skepticism. That doesn't mean I withdraw from the discussion. On the contrary, I'd love to help shape that universe, that metaverse, but I have no illusion about the power of the commercial interest and also of the dividedness of the audience. So I do think we can make a difference, but I'm skeptical as to who I trust with my data and what kind of software I use or what kind of hardware I use. I'm not going to just embrace it.
So
I think the UKRI's total research budget from the government is 7 billion. That's for everything from aerospace, medical, and the metaverse. Facebook's or Meta is 10 billion just for the metaverse. And that's one of about 20 companies in the US that are really focusing their research on the metaverse. So there is so much more money going into commercial research on the metaverse than we're investing in the UK. It's great, 100 million is going into to your project, but we're going to need a lot more to have any sort of traction as individual artists. What I was going to say though is, I mean, I just want to your point, Mark Zuckerberg didn't make it here today. That is sad. Yeah. However, I was at South by Southwest and he made it to that, which is a community of creatives. And he turned up and said, I'm having an open metaverse platform. I'm engaging with the other platforms, so working with Fortnite and Epic. They are trying to do that, and that was put to proof just a few weeks ago when they created the Open Metaverse Consortium, which included Disguise, which is a London-based theatrical media company. I work in the theatre industry. So it's the right people are in that consortium. They're creating an open metaverse structure, and Facebook's just one of them. Meta, sorry. So I think that the amount of investment that's going into the metaverse from these commercial companies means that it will happen that way. We can't get away from these companies leading the technology, but they are platforms. And I'm from the theatre industry, so I think of it as the same as, if the Royal Opera House is a platform for artists to produce work, they may actually control the narrative a little bit by funding certain types of work. That's where we have to push back as audiences and artists. But the artwork is still our choice. So we can go into Facebook Horizons, which is their metaverse platform, and create the work we want to create, influence the audiences, and hopefully that will mean that we can influence this money for good rather than relying on Zuckerberg to make those decisions. So I think we have the power, but we do have to work with the metaverse that is emerging.
Hi, Maureen Kendall, Dream Studio. So I was very interested in what you had to say, everybody, the whole panel, but particularly you, Jonathan, when you showed us what was happening in the Dubai Expo. And as a arts producer in this area, I'm very interested in the conversations and avatars talking to each other. And what is the nature of that conversation? And are they creating anything? Because we saw lots of wonderful buildings and so on. So I was interested in the more of the detail of what is the nature of the interactions of the users.
Yeah, I don't think that the app that they produce is much about creating stuff. So yes, it could have been more interesting in that sense. I mean, you can wander around. Well, it's like the real expo. You can't create a pavilion or whatever. Similarly, you can't. You could imagine.
So maybe they're missing a trick then.
Yeah, well, yes.
Because they're not engaging with the different
so I think
diverse communities and users that are coming to the expo.
I think maybe the next expo can do more on that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sean Clark. I'm sorry I missed the earlier part, but I tried to watch it on the train, but my internet connection wasn't very good. There could be a bit of a weakness in the metaverse. I'd like to just explore Jonathan's point about the early web. I've been doing a lot of work looking at my archive and what was going on 30 years ago, and it feels like we're almost exactly at the same point with the metaverse that we were with the web in 1992. However, there's some key differences. The web was an open standard, no one profited from it. The technology for creating content, HTML, was open. The serving technology, Apache, was open source, and the browsing technology, Mozilla, was open source. And we also had a maxim, which was information wants to be free. And there was an anti-commercial and very sort of positive connecting the world sort of attitude. The problem I see with the metaverse, I know it's in theory open and we can take it in the direction we like, but none of those previous things are really true. There are proposals, but we're not starting from the point of an open system that anyone can control. So my fear, maybe on the slightly pessimistic side, is that if we're starting with these huge commercial interests, in 30 years' time, we can almost guarantee that it will be dominated by these large commercial interests. So do you have any thoughts on that?
I think you're right. Yes, it is a different. I mean, we were just very lucky to have Tim Berners-Lee, who's a very altruistic person, came from a sort of, although his parents were computer scientists, there was sort of religious altruism in the family. And because of that, and he happened to be in the right place at the right time with the right idea, okay, I've invented this thing, you don't want to make any money out of it, do you? And CERN, not being a commercial operation, said, oh yes, that's fine, we'll give it away. Yes, we're not in that situation. We've got huge Facebook, yes, with tons of money to burn. And yeah, yes. Well, yes. Well, there's no reason why it couldn't happen, but I don't think it is, from what I can see so far. But on the other hand, as you said, with the artistic side, whatever, even if it's a commercial platform, if you can create the interesting things within that, then perhaps it won't be as bad as some people might predict. But yes, it could go anyway.
I think that moving from the web-based period that we've been in, the so-called digital age, it's all about information and communication. And that's taken a turn where there's been a lot of censorship. That's been breaking down, but we're not moving. We're moving away from that into really an image and media-based system that's more about ourselves, our identity, and human to human interaction rather than human computer interaction. And that really
has a massive impact on what it's about. But what we're moving into is much, as a human perspective, much more all-encompassing. The digital age didn't take over our life and identity. It was very controlled in a screen. And we're moving away from a flat screen into a 3D environment so much about our human-to-human interaction. So we're dealing with something that potentially is much more powerful, but this is why it was easier then to have that control. Yeah.
I mean, I think there's one thing to take from the kind of hyper-corporatized building of the metaverse now, which is that's why it might not work. I mean, to go back to my theme, like a lot of the most important things happen kind of by mistake. The web in its first version was kind of a piece of good fortune that grew from the inside and therefore actually reflected real demand. There was an unmet need that we couldn't quite articulate back in the early 90s that suddenly start to kind of grow organically together and then explode with stimulation. The metaverse in its worst is being hyperimposed from the top down of technology businesses without any real sense of public demand. I mean, the kind of stat that's been floating around LinkedIn over the last week, there's only like 1,000 users on Decentraland at any one moment. Like, there's a lot of these things that actually people don't seem to want. Oculus is not a hugely popular device, despite all of these things. Like, we know they're coming. So does anyone actually really want them? And so, despite the 10 billion a year of R&D investment, we've all spent, I'm sure many of you have spent time with some of the people who work in those businesses, so they understand what the audience ultimately wants and, more importantly, needs from you, not necessarily. So, that in a way is the kind of the gap where our agency might come through, is that because we don't actually necessarily want these things, we always have the right to ignore them. We mostly managed to get away without wanting virtual reality headsets, despite the fact they've been commercially available for the last decade of reasonable quality. Maybe the same with the Apple headset, right? They only got, but of course, the power of commerce is such that the Apple Watch seems to be still a device absolutely without a meaningful use case. I mean, and the fact that they've virtually, so they can force it through the sheer power of economics. But this is the chance for a moment of agency, as a lot of this stuff is happening without us really neither wanting nor needing it. So we do get the chance to kind of decide.
John? Yes, with there's something in Jonathan's talks that you had some examples of music festivals like Glastonbury and stuff like that. And it kind of reminded me of the idea of temporary autonomous zones, which I'm sure Carl knows about, which is kind of connected with the idea of sort of raves and things as being sort of festival experiences which are sort of outside of sort of mainstream society in terms of where they take place, which have fantastic potential for sort of individual and collective transformation and imagination of society in different kinds of ways. And I guess on the one hand, you have sort of the metaverses maybe providing that sort of possibility, but at the same time, the sort of ground that it's on is kind of owned by sort of Meta and Facebook and all of that. So it's almost like my concern is if artists are creating things in this space, are they just kind of like creating bait for people to go into this area that's already owned, basically?
Yes, well, I guess we can hope there's a bit of disruption in the metaverse. People move in and have raves or whatever. I'm sure that sort of thing may well happen.
We've got one last question here from Brianne, and then we really will then have to stop for lunch, otherwise we'll have
Jonathan, you asked what other metaverses could be there. So what if the world we're living in, this for the younger generation at least, this is the metaverse, because for them, what they do online has become embedded as reality for them. A couple of days ago, we had a day of mourning in our house because one of the Minecraft bloggers had passed away, sadly. And my 15-year-old had to break the news to my 11-year-old. And it was a very, very sad day. This is a person they had never actually seen.